Chapter 275. The Immortal Pressure, the Divine Sense Pressure unique to immortals. Immortals were not humans. After transcending the thunder tribulation of heaven immortal and ascending to become immortals, immortals began to come into contact with the true nature of the heaven and earth, and began to grasp the true power of the heaven and earth. Gradually, their immortal souls would carry an aura of the truth of the heaven and earth. For all cultivators below the realm of immortals, this insignificant aura would be like a mouse encountering a tiger, as they would suffer a mental suppression in all aspects. Mortals could not sense the immortal pressure of immortals, for they were like the insects in a deep, dirty pond, unable to see what was beyond it. On the other hand, cultivators could sense the immortal pressure of immortals clearly, for they were like the fishes swimming in the clear spring water. Through the clear spring water, they could see a tiny bit of the true nature of the world, the composition of the heaven and earth, and the principles of operation. They had the ability to sense the dreadfulness of immortals, and that was why all cultivators would face the pressure of immortal pressure directly. If it were those immortals with pure and kind character, they would always restrain their immortal pressure, at most letting it hover several tens of feet around them. Firstly, it could drive away evil spirits. Secondly, it could drive away insects, ants, and beasts, and thirdly, it could purify one's body from being polluted by dust. Only when they were fighting against their enemies, would these immortals unleash their immortal pressure, attacking their enemies on the mental level. But obviously, Han Shao was not such a kind immortal. Right after he rushed into the atmosphere of the planet, he unleashed all his immortal pressure without any scruples. In just a blink of an eye, the immortal pressure had enveloped the entire planet. All living beings with cultivation base above Xiantian realm could sense the arrival of this frightening pressure. Han Shao transformed into a beam of colorful light, following closely behind Shadow Cloud as he flew past the top of Wu Qi and his company. The enormous immortal pressure made Wu Qi and his company stagger, nearly falling to the ground. When Han Shao flew past them, the natural energies froze abruptly. Wu Qi and his company could not absorb any energy from the outside world, and the energies inside their bodies suddenly froze into ice like water, completely out of their control. Among all the cultivators above Xiantian realm, only the innate energies of 5 elements in the 7 stealing heaven meridians in Wu Qi's arms were not affected by the immortal pressure, and were still circulating freely in his meridians. Wu Qi was the only one who could still straighten his body and watch the 2 beams of light fly past his head. Wu Qi patted on Princess Zhang Li's shoulder and roared at the top of his voice, "Bring everyone back to G City through the teleportation formation, hide in the house next to the No. 1 Martial Club, and don't go to the Imperial Palace. That place is heavily guarded, and it will only attract more attention. Remember, take all the female officials and Imperial guards with you and leave as quickly as possible. Just order these servants to stand guard here." Forcefully patting on Catfish Flood Dragon's head with his palm, Wu Qi cried out, "I'll leave Zi Xian in your care. You must take good care of her, and don't let her act like a spoiled child. When we return to G City, don't wander around aimlessly. Just wait for my news." The Catfish Flood Dragon's pitch-black head had turned pale because of the tremendous immortal pressure. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, she quickly nodded her head and said, I understand. Go back to G City, it's safer there. Don't go to the Imperial Palace, don't go to those places that attract attention. Just hide in the residences and don't go out." Why would a heaven immortal appear here? That man just now was a heaven immortal. Could it be that he is an immortal? Oh my ancestors, why would a heaven immortal come here? How many tens of thousands of years has it been since I've heard of a heaven immortal coming here? The cowardly Catfish Flood Dragon was scared out of her wits by the sudden appearance of a foreign immortal, and her words were a little unclear. Wu Qi hugged Princess Zhanglu, who kept stamping her feet, and gave her a strong kiss on the lips. After that, he cried out sternly, "Zi Xian, don't be willful. These female officials and imperial guards are the capital for us to make a fortune in the future. We can't lose them here. Bring them back to G City and hide them. I'll stay here and find out who this heaven immortal is, and why he came here." Princess Zhanglu stared blankly at Wu Qi and roared, "It's too dangerous. You can't stay here. Before her voice could fade away, a strong five-colored beam fell from the sky from over 100 miles away. Several dozens of colorful petals spun rapidly and smashed into the ground, shattering a 10 miles tall lofty mountain and a few nearby small mountain ranges. A violent wave of energy came whistling over from over 100 miles away. Like the head of a huge tsunami, it rolled up Wu Qi and his company and threw them far away. Looking at Princess Xianglu, who refused to let him go, Wu Qi gave her another kiss, then whispered into her ear, don't worry, I still have a soul replacement puppet to protect me. It's not that easy to kill me. This heaven immortal has a strange background, and I'll feel uneasy if I don't find out his background. I'll go and come back as soon as possible, don't worry. I'm not good at fighting, but when it comes to escaping, I'm the best. With a wave of his hand, a sheet of white light shot out from the spirit breeding ring, and all 100 longbow men turned into bright beams and flew back into the ring. Princess Xianglu glared at Wu Qi coquettishly and said in a low voice, if you die, Xianglu will definitely avenge you. Who says you must be my husband? Your words are really. Stomping her feet, Princess Xianglu transformed into a five-colored beam and shot out. After that, her melodious voice echoed through the area 100 miles in circumference, everyone, listen up. All female officials and Imperial Army, listen up. Gather at the nearest teleportation formation and return to G City. Do not talk nonsense and disturb people's minds. Those who disobey will be executed. As Princess Xianglu gave her order, all the female officials and Imperial Army who were busy in the surroundings hastily stopped what they were doing and gathered all the important things around them. Ignoring the panicked cries of those hard laborers, they quickly gathered at the nearest teleportation formation. Gradually, a commotion broke out among the hard laborers, but Wu Qi had no intention of transferring them. As a heaven immortal, no matter how vile his conduct was, he would never find trouble with these ordinary mortals. Therefore, these hard laborers were the safest people at the moment. When he saw Princess Xianglu step into the teleportation formation and return to G City together with a few serving ladies and guards, Wu Qi hastily transformed into a stream of yellow mist and plunged into the ground. Using his fastest speed, he sped towards the direction where the white cloud disappeared. After chasing for over 100 miles, Wu Qi came to the side of the mountain that was turned into ashes by a casual strike from Han Shao. There was only a deep pit, several tens of miles deep, and water had begun to accumulate at the bottom of the pit. The strike just now had pierced through the underground energy veins. The pit was clean, and nothing was left behind, except a strong aura of demon beasts lingering in the air. Very quickly, Wu Qi analyzed what happened just now. When they were passing by the mountain, as one was chasing and the other was fleeing, a powerful demon beast suddenly let out a provocative cry at the heaven immortal who was passing by in the sky, as it could not withstand the stimulation from the immortal pressure. In the end, the heaven immortal killed the demon beast with a casual strike like he was slapping a fly, and even turned the mountain into nothingness. The demon aura that lingered in the air was very strong and pure. It was at least a demon beast of nascent soul realm. A nascent soul demon beast was killed so casually by a human. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi continued his pursuit. Using the innate escape art of Earth element, he could travel several hundred miles with just one vibration by borrowing the energy ripples from the underground energy veins. With just a few leaps, Wu Qi had already traveled over 10,000 miles away. Right after he came out from an underground metal vein, a loud boom, as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking, was suddenly heard coming from above. Hastily, Wu Qi retracted his aura and poked his head out from the woods on top of a small hill. He saw a strange-looking boat amidst the white cloud being smashed by a clump of colorful petals, rolling and falling to the ground. Right when a figure flew out from the boat, the green figure behind it grabbed him by the neck and dragged him up into the air. "Junior, you fled so far, and even risked your life to bring me into the flaming nether ocean. But, what is the result?" Han Shao threw his head back and laughed wildly, grabbing Jiang Qingzi's neck and slamming him several tens of times to the ground. Jiang Qingzi was like a scarecrow, as he was swung up by Han Shao without any ability to resist. His body smashed viciously onto the hard mountain rock, breaking every single bone in his body inch by inch. The cultivation technique inherited from Jiangqing Zi's sect focused more on the utilization of energy and nascent divinity, and it could be said that the tempering of the fleshly body was negligible. In fact, the fleshly body of an Earth Immortal from White Cloud Immortals sect was even weaker than that of other Earth Immortals. The advantage of White Cloud Immortals sect did not lie in the fleshly body. After being pinched and slammed by Han Shao like that, all the bones in Jiangqing Zi's body were broken, and the pain made him burst into tears instinctively. Clutching Jiangqing Zi's neck with one hand, Han Shao let out a strange laugh and said, "Are you crying? Junior, weren't you very courageous when you cursed me to die without any descendants just now? Weren't you very courageous? Why are you crying now? Hee hee, get on your knees and beg me to spare your life. Perhaps, I'll..." Damn it, what is this? Han Shao stood over 9 feet tall, and just like Qin Qing Shui, he was as skinny as a bamboo pole. He was clad in a white Daoist robe, emanating an immense cold air, as if he was made from Xian Bing. His face was expressionless. He had a very high cheekbone, a very thin nose, and lips as thin as razor blades. It was obvious that he was a dark, stubborn, mean, and heartless man. Originally, he wanted to strangle Jiangqing Zi to death, but his eyes were quickly attracted by a pale green orchid growing on a white dragon pine tree 15 feet away from him. From time to time, these orchids would emit a faint green light, constantly absorbing and releasing the surrounding natural energies, condensing them into tiny drops of spirit liquid, which would be absorbed by the wisteria and injected into the Ganoderma meat and leaves. Wu Qi gave the Ganoderma orchids a glance. It was just an unusual meat Ganoderma orchids that could be found everywhere in the depth of Meng Mountains, and judging from its age, it was at least 1,000 years old. None of the demons and devils in Meng Mountains would pick this juvenile Ganoderma orchids and consume them. They would only fight for those Ganoderma orchids that were at least 10,000 years old, using its medicinal strength to purify their demon energy, temper their nascent divinity, and improve their own dermic powers and cultivation base. However, Han Shao Immortal's next move was beyond Wu Qi's expectation. He simply threw Jiangqing Zi to the side, then leaped and leaped towards the orchid, reaching out his hand greedily. Like a lecher caressing the tender skin of his most beloved concubine, his fingers trembling as he caressed the orchid's petals. Oh heavens! This is at least 1,500 years old. Jiangqing Zi, your White Cloud Immortal sect is an expert in concocting medicinal pills. Have you ever seen a 1,500 years old 9-leaf Ganoderma orchids? I'm afraid it's difficult to find one that is even 800 years old now, right? Saliva was already dripping down from the corner of Han Zhao's mouth. With all his bones broken, Jiangqing Zi raised his head with great difficulty, fixing his eyes on the 9-leaf Ganoderma orchids. With a scornful look on his face, he sneered at Han Shao and said, 800 years old? For the past 10,000 years, the oldest 9-leaf Ganoderma orchids that we found in White Cloud Immortal sect was merely 500 years old. For the sake of that Ganoderma orchids, 2 Uncle Masters even fought a fierce battle with the people of Spirit Breeding sect. One Uncle Master even lost an arm before he managed to snatch the Ganoderma orchids back. Wu Qi's heart sank instantly. Obviously, these 2 men came from beyond the heavens, and yet, they were so poor. If a 1,500 years old Ganoderma orchids could make them so excited, then what would happen to those several thousand years old, or even 10,000 years old medicinal herbs that those great demons and great demons in the depth of Meng Mountains? While Wu Qi was murmuring to himself, Han Shao Immortal suddenly screamed out again. Chapter 276. Han Shao threw his head back and laughed wildly, waving his arms and legs as he said, "The heaven has taken pity on me. A demon's soul of 10,000 years, a demon's soul of 10,000 years. Such a powerful demon aura, and such a pure divine sense. With meticulous crafting, I can at least craft it into a middle-grade spirit item. As long as I carefully nurture it for 10,000 years, it is not impossible for me to upgrade it into an upper-grade spirit item, or even an immortal item. Ha ha ha, I, Han Shao, am really lucky today." A vague green shadow, half human and half tree, roughly shaped like a tree and having the face of an old man, flashed on the surface of the green crystal. Amidst a wild howl that was filled with both rage and sorrow, it transformed into a green beam and was about to flee. However, with a casual grab, Han Shao had the vague shadow confined in midair, then shoved it into the green crystal. Immediately, a blinding green gleam burst out from the green crystal, followed by the sound of weeping. Then, a clear figure appeared in the green crystal, which was exactly the same as the green shadow, half human and half tree. Jiang Qingzi breathed out a long sigh, then said honestly, apart from the ancestral master, there are 2 elders of heaven immortal realm, over 100 masters of nascent divinity realm, and over 1,000 disciples of nascent soul realm. Energy stones are a huge expense, and energy stones are needed everywhere. Currently, masters of nascent divinity realm can only receive 1,000 pieces of lower-grade energy stones as an offering every year. If it were a nascent divinity cultivator, he could only shatter all the rocks in the energy stone mine with brute force, and then pick out the energy stones from the shattered rocks. That would definitely cause a great loss to the energy stones in the energy stone mine. On top of that, even if it were a nascent divinity cultivator, breaking the rocks would also waste a great amount of energy, and it was not worth it to use them to open up the energy stone mine. Wu Qi was lying under a rhododendron, looking at the green crystal and could not help but breathe out a long sigh. Perhaps this old pine tree had lived for over 10,000 years, and had already formed a demon soul and demon core. With just a little more time, he would be able to cultivate the body of a demon. It was 100 times more difficult for a plant to transform into a human form than a beast, a demon, and a demon. Therefore, although this old pine tree had lived for a very long time, it still retained its original appearance of a big tree. A large sheet of 5-colored light burst out from Han Zhao's palm, within which were countless colorful petals wheeling at top speed, shooting towards Yan Dan and the others. Grabbing Jiang Qingzi by the neck and lifting him up, Han Shao Immortal teleported himself 10 miles away. At the heavenly immortal realm, executing teleportation divine ability was like breathing or drinking water for an ordinary person, and it was natural to the extreme. Without the slightest sign, their figures would flash and they'd already teleport out without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. Compared to Waning Dragon King and the other peak stage nascent divinity old demons, they still had to spend a period of time condensing their energies and reciting some incantations before they could break through the void and teleport away. There was simply no comparison between the two. A loud buzzing noise rang out. Han Shao Immortal took a small step back, while Yan Dan and the others were pushed several tens of feet back by Chi-Chi. Han Shao Immortal roared with laughter. He threw Jiang Qingzi to the ground, then extended his arm and grabbed towards a mountain range 1,000 miles away. Nevertheless, Han Shao Immortal burst into a loud and joyful laughter. I never thought that there would actually be such a rich energy stone mine here. Marvelous, marvelous. He lifted up Jiang Qingzi, whose arms were still dripping with blood, then flew above the energy stone mine. Casually, he swung his arm downwards. A large sheet of green mist sprayed out from his sleeve, rolling and sweeping across the energy stone mine. Approximately 1 million lower-grade energy stones, 30,000 middle-grade energy stones, and less than 2,000 upper-grade energy stones left the ground and flew into his palm. Suddenly, Han Shao Immortal roared with laughter and said, "This is absurd. How dare a bunch of cultivators talk nonsense about slaying an immortal? Today, I'll let you know what the true power of an immortal is." A large cloud spread out from the western horizon, as several thousand cultivators and demons emerged out of nowhere. With a sway of his body, Wu Qi transformed into a clump of green mist, wriggling through the grass and trees, and followed closely behind Han Shao Immortal at a distance of less than 1 mile. A beam of green light swept across the heaven and earth. An enormous spiritual pressure spread out in all directions like a raging ocean, bringing with it a faint rumble of wind and thunder. The faces of Yan Dan and the others turned pale, as they were nearly knocked off the cloud by the pressure unleashed by Han Shao Immortal. However, in the blink of an eye, numerous powerful waves of divine will rolled out and merged into one, clashing against the immortal pressure unleashed by Han Shao Immortal. Once a spirit of grass and would transformed into a demon, their dermic powers and divine abilities would generally be much stronger than those of animals and demons. However, the period before they could transform was the most dangerous period for these spirit of grass and wood. Han Shao Immortal had seized the demon core, which was formed from the essence of the great tree over 10,000 years, and forcibly imprisoned his demon soul within it. With that, there was no longer any possibility for this old tree demon to transform into a demon. Perhaps, the best outcome for him would be to become the item spirit of some powerful spirit item. With the enormous energy essence gathered by this old tree demon's enormous body, he could at least become the item spirit of a middle-grade spirit item. A sheet of green light burst out from his right palm, transforming into a huge palm formed from green light, grabbing towards a small mountain range that stretched over 300 miles away from them. The gigantic palm blotted out the sky and covered an area of 500 miles in circumference. He grabbed the small mountain range, and with just a slight shake of the palm, he crushed the several hundreds of mountains in the mountain range into powder. As the wind blew, all the dust was blown away, revealing an energy stone vein underneath the mountain range that glinted brightly. His divine will spread out, and Han Shao cried out once again, "How is this possible? It's actually..." With a complacent slap that sent Jiang Qingzi flying several hundred feet away, Han Shao breathed out a long sigh complacently and said, "I can't believe that this planet under my feet is actually nurturing so many natural treasures. This is truly my fortune. It would be a pity if no one could enjoy this scene. Junior, this is the reason why I spared your life temporarily. Now, I'll show you how many treasures I can find in this place." Just like before, a huge greenish hand flew out, grabbing the mountain range that stretched over 2,000 miles. With a shake, the mountain range shattered to pieces, revealing a large energy stone vein underneath, which was produced by 7 to 8 types of precious metals, including purple gold, silver essence, red copper, and so on. A green gleam shone in Han Zhao's eyes as he threw his head back and laughed wildly into the sky, staring at the energy stone vein, which was 100 times more than the small energy stone vein. According to the standard of Great Yan Dynasty, this energy stone vein could only be considered as a small to medium-sized one. Stretching for more than 40 miles, the density of the rock was about 10 square feet. If there was a piece of spirit stone in the rock, out of 30 low-grade spirit stones, 1 mid-grade spirit stone would be produced, and out of 150 mid-grade spirit stones, 1 high-grade spirit stone would be produced. In the database of strategic resources of Great Yan Dynasty, a mineral vein like this was a mineral vein that had no mining value. Wonderful, wonderful. Jiang Qingzi, Jr., I really can't bear to kill you. This planet is actually a priceless planet that has never been exploited. Feel it, the density of the natural energies in the surroundings is at least 3 times stronger than the natural energies in White Cloud Planet. The natural treasures here, as well as all kinds of rare and precious mineral veins, are too many to count. Wonderful, wonderful. I can totally use this planet to establish my own sect. While Han Shao was feeling complacent, he suddenly turned his head to the west and cried out sternly, "Who are you, Junior? How dare you peep over there?" Among these cultivators and demons, Wu Qi knew Yan Dan, Chu Ping, Mod, Sun Kuang, Xiang Yu, Duke of Longyang, and even Gi Gazi, Hu Hai, Su Fu, Li Si, and many others from Daqin. There were also Wanying Dragon King, Xiong Wanling, He Qianqiu, and a large number of demon kings whose cultivation base was above the realm of nascent divinity. According to the different powers they belonged to, they formed a formation on clouds and flew slowly towards Wu Qi. Therefore, regardless of whether it was Great Yan Dynasty, Great Chu, or Great Wei, the mining of energy stone mines was always carried out by mortal laborers. When Han Shao revealed his mining ability, it was more than enough to make all the higher-ups of the various dynasties jealous, as the efficiency of mining was simply too high. Wu Qi was struck dumb with amazement. Sure enough, this was the power of a heaven immortal, as the control of his magical power had reached a level that no nascent divinity cultivator could catch up with. At the same time, the green mist sprayed out by Han Shao had wrapped up all the over 1 million energy stones in the mineral vein. Every single energy stone was pulled out from the rocks by a suitable force, and the surrounding rocks did not suffer too much damage. All the energy stones in this energy stone mine had fallen into his sleeve. Not right. This is wonderful. Han Shao stared blankly at the huge pine tree. Suddenly, he let out a wild laugh, waving his sleeve and waving it. A loud boom rang out, as the huge pine tree suddenly exploded into dust and drifted away in all directions. All the life force in the pine tree had been gathered at the core of the tree trunk, in a spindle-shaped crystal that was growing longer and thicker than an adult's arm, glinting with a dazzling green gleam. Not right, not right. Han Shao unleashed his divine will, scanning through the forest 1,000 miles in circumference in just a blink of an eye. Every flower, every blade of grass, every tree, and even every grain of sand in the forest was exposed to his divine will. Apart from Wu Qi, who was hiding in the bushes with a mystic aura restraining technique, everything else was covered by his divine will, and nothing could be missed. The spot where Han Shao teleported to was a huge, black-skinned pine tree, standing 3,000 feet tall and 120 feet wide. Its bark was densely covered with moss and wisteria, and a very strong life force of plants kept spreading out from its body. Every now and then, the natural energies would be absorbed by the pine tree. As a result, the entire pine tree was enshrouded in a faint layer of green light. Han Shao was trembling with excitement. In the past, I was all alone, as all the planets in Liyuan Galaxy that were suitable for founding a sect were occupied by immortal sects of various sizes. But little did I expect that I could actually find such a precious planet in this damned flaming nether ocean. So, I'm really... Laughing wildly, Han Shao waved his hand casually and chopped off both of Jiang Qingzi's arms. Grinning coldly, he turned to Jiang Qingzi and said, "For the sake that you've brought me to such a precious place, I'll let you live a little longer." Hee, but, Junior, you are a crafty and cunning one. In order to prevent you from spoiling my business, I can't let you keep both of your arms. With a terrified expression, Jiang Qingzi stared at the mountain range that was destroyed by Han Shao with a flip of his palm, then at the ground underneath, which was now shaped like a beehive after he extracted over 1 million energy stones. Shaking his head, he smiled bitterly and said, "It has been over 80,000 years since White Cloud Immortal Sect was founded, and all the energy stone veins on White Cloud Planet have been completely extracted. Now, we can only rely on the energy stones that these energy stone veins absorb the natural energies every year to produce new energy stones. Upper-grade energy stones, this energy stone vein is indeed very rich. Junior, how many energy stone veins do you still have in White Cloud Immortal Sect?" In your sect, even the second-generation disciples of nascent divinity realm, how many energy stones can they enjoy every year? After fiddling with the energy stones for a while, Han Shao gave Jiang Qingzi a heavy slap on the face. Inside the prison cart, Hu Hai suddenly let out a loud, strange laugh and said, "So this old fellow really thinks this place is under his control? I wonder if I can concoct a spirit pill with the blood essence of an immortal, can it make my cultivation base take a great leap? Gentlemen, let's put aside the enmity between us and join hands to kill him. What do you say?" Obviously, Han Shao was taken aback. Frowning, he gave the large group of cultivators and demons flying towards them a glance, then suddenly unleashed all his immortal pressure. After putting all the energy stones under his sleeve, a greedy expression that could not be concealed emerged on Han Shao's face. Foaming at the corner of his mouth, he fished out an upper-grade energy stone the size of a toddler's head and held it in his palm, then began to carefully rub and fiddle with it. Chapter 277. The entire sky was blotted with the 5-colored petals unleashed by Han Shao. It was unknown what kind of magical treasure he was using, but these petals seemed to possess a sentient nature. Each petal was like a living creature, actively searching for the weakest spot of the enemy and attacking it. When countless petals shot through the air with ear-splitting noises, the ground turned dark, as all the sunlight was absorbed by these petals. Not a single ray of light could reach the ground. Sensing the pressure from Han Shao Immortal's immortal pressure, Yan Dan, and the others, who had spent a huge amount of energy to cross the entire territory of Great Yan from Meng Mountains and rush to the shore of Great Eastern Ocean, hastily unleashed their defensive magical treasures when they saw Han Shao Immortal launching his attack. They transformed into beams of light and wrapped themselves tightly within. A series of explosions rang out one after another. The power of each petal was shockingly strong. Yan Dan and the other cultivators with weaker cultivation base were knocked flying away immediately, while several thousand cultivators and demons, including Chi-Chi, coughed out blood and suffered severe injuries. On the other hand, Waning Dragon King and the other nascent divinity cultivators could only hide behind their defensive magical treasures, enduring the endless attacks from the petals in a sorry state. The spinning petals quickly cut the light beams unleashed by their defensive magical treasures. After a few seconds of cutting, the petals exploded violently. The explosive power of each petal was comparable to a full-force strike unleashed by a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator like Waning Dragon King. Almost every single one of them felt that they were being attacked by several dozens of peak-stage nascent divinity enemies. Although Waning Dragon King and the other nascent divinity cultivators had a profound cultivation base and were protected by powerful magical treasures, they could only hold on for a breath longer than Yan Dan, Su Fu, Li Si, and the others, before they were forced to retreat while coughing blood. He Qianqiu and the other demon kings, who had weaker cultivation base, had their bodies ripped apart by the petals. Blood was sprayed all over their bodies, making them look extremely miserable. With only the strength of one man, he had forced back several thousand strongest cultivators from 5 dynasties in just a blink of an eye. The frightening overall strength of Han Shao Immortal made Yan Dan and the other nascent divinity cultivators' faces turn pale, and none of them knew what to do next. With just one strike, Han Shao Immortal pushed back all the enemies, then tilted his head up in a reserved manner, sneered, and said, "I never expected that apart from a priceless planet like this, there are actually so many excellent disciples who came to me on their own." Han Shao snorted coldly, then said complacently, "I suppose all of you are cultivators born and raised on this planet? I'll give you a chance. All human cultivators can join my sect and receive the supreme immortal magic. All demon cultivators can join my sect and become the divine guardian beasts. This is the custom of the major immortal sections. Anyone who disobeys will have their entire family exterminated." Han Zhao's eyes shone with a bright gleam, as he looked at Yan Dan and his company greedily. Establishing a sect sounded simple, but even with the backing of a treasured planet, it was still extremely difficult to cultivate a group of capable disciples. However, things were different now that Yan Dan and his company had come to him. Nascent divinity cultivators were the main force of all the major immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy, and there were several dozens of them present on the scene. Nascent soul cultivators were the foundation for the prosperity of all the major immortal sects, and there were at least 1,000 nascent soul cultivators present on the scene. With such a scale, as long as a unique soul-controlling restrictive spell was planted in their souls, all of them would become the most loyal disciples. With this, the foundation of a powerful sect would be laid down. With these disciples as the foundation, it would be much easier to slowly cultivate the most loyal disciples of the sect. Whether a sect was strong or prosperous, it could not do without these nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators to keep up the facade. Han Shao let out a long cry filled with great joy, then cried out sternly, "I bet you have never seen a heaven immortal before. You have no idea that even though you have formed your nascent divinity and are able to leave your fleshly body and travel freely, you still have no way to fight against a heaven immortal. A heaven immortal is the true immortal. Cultivators like you, even though you have the title of immortal, are still mortals. Submit to me obediently, release your nascent divinity, and let me plant the soul-controlling restrictive spell on you. This is the only way out for you." Yan Dan and his company did not say a word. They were all mighty figures, so how could they submit to a heaven immortal who appeared out of nowhere? Yan Dan, who owned a powerful magical treasure, began exchanging glances with Chu Ping and the others in the crowd. If all of them unleashed all their trump cards and used all their precious treasures, including the Disc of Heavenly Tao Transmigration and the Banner of Chiyu, they might still have the chance to kill this heaven immortal. Originally, when the various dynasties were at war, they would fight happily and boisterously behind closed doors. No matter who won or lost, it was an old grudge between the dynasties. In short, they were old acquaintances, and they could still accept the result. However, Han Shao Immortal suddenly showed up in such a domineering manner, declaring that the planet under their feet was his personal property, and everyone must become his disciple. How could these proud and arrogant heroes from various dynasties accept this? Hu Hai, who had just retreated while coughing blood, suddenly let out a loud, strange laugh and said, "Idiot! You have no idea who we are, and how dare you say you want us to become your disciples? I don't care if you are a heaven immortal or some other bullshit." Dachin, Dachin, Dachin. Hu Hai roared at the top of his voice, Dachin. Next to him, a handsome man clad in a black robe embroidered with 9 dragons and holding a pitch-black heavy sword slowly raised his left hand up, clenched it into a fist, and cried out in a deep voice, Dachin, the mighty army, advances and never retreats. If you want us to submit to you, you'll have to take a full-force strike from me, the hero Dachin. The man turned to look at Yen Dan, Chu Ping, and the others, then called out one by one, Yen Dan, Chu Ping, Wei Wuji, and Zhao Sheng, as a heaven immortal, do you have the courage to kill this man together with my brother? Yen Dan, Chu Ping, and the others roared with laughter, wiping the blood from the corner of their mouths and standing next to the man. Chu Ping cried out coldly, "What Prince Fu Su said is exactly what we want. He, after we kill this old fool, we'll divide everything he has equally among the 5 dynasties." All the civil and military officials from various dynasties, as well as the imperial advisors and demon kings who came along with the crowd, let out long roars as they stood side by side with Yen Dan and the others. Regardless of their nationality, regardless of the grudges in the past, and regardless of the new and old grudges, all the cultivators from 5 dynasties stood in a single row. Suddenly, a cloud came flying over at top speed from the southwest direction, while a loud laughter rang out, "My old friends, it has been a long time since we last met. How are you? You've done a great deed in Meng Mountains and He Mountains, why don't you let us, the great Qi dynasty, join in and have a good time? Why don't we do it this way, whoever kills this old fool today will have 50% of the immortal ruins in He Mountains taken by that dynasty. What do you think?" Yen Dan and the others laughed joyfully and said, "Meng Chang, Tian Wen, you, the great Qi dynasty, have finally shown up. Come, let's join hands and kill this old crook." Nearly 1,000 civil and military officials of Great Qi dynasty, including the Emperor Tian Wen, had also arrived in a mighty manner. The combined forces of 6 dynasties had rolled up a monstrous killing intent, which transformed into a murderous intent that nearly took a corporeal form, locking onto Han Shao Immortal from a distance away. The prime treasures of Yen Dan and the others were ready to strike out at any time. The enormous power of the prime treasures was rocking violently inside their bodies, while the raging energy that spread in all directions penetrated through their bodies and vaguely seeped out, forming into a magnificent 7-colored cloud around them. Han Shao Immortal turned to look at Yen Dan and the others hesitantly. He had a rather bad feeling. These cultivators before his eyes were very different from the other cultivators he met during his travels. No matter it was their spirit, energy, and spirit, or the vigorous fighting spirit, none of them could be found in those cultivators in the outside world. If he had to describe them, each and every one of these cultivators before his eyes was like a divine dragon among the humans, with an imposing and extraordinary appearance. On the other hand, those cultivators in the outside world, even those so-called geniuses from various immortal sects, were like donkey dung eggs when compared to these people. Although they looked glamorous on the outside, they were not as good on the inside. Especially for Yen Dan and the others, he could clearly sense a very strong force brewing inside their bodies. For some unknown reason, Han Shao Immortal had a feeling that the force could very well pose a threat to his immortal body. Even though he had a prime magical treasure of lower-grade immortal item level, it did not bring him any sense of security. He had a feeling that if he really got into a conflict with these people, even if he could kill all of them, he would have to pay a heavy price. The bad feeling made Han Shao Immortal extremely furious. Ants! Do you really want to die? He roared. Do you know that no matter how many of you there are, you are still no match for an immortal? You have absolutely no idea how huge the gap is between you and an immortal. I'll give you one last chance. Join me, and you will be my first disciple. Hu Hai's furious roar broke the strange confrontation. Suddenly, a large sheet of dark light burst out from the black prison chariot around him, amidst which, countless shadows of fiend gods struggling and roaring emerged. Hu Hai roared fiercely, "Old fogey. If you want to fight, just fight. It's nothing but death. We've already died once, so why should we be afraid of an old fogey like you? Fuck your mother. Don't let me find your mother, or else I'll definitely bring her into my mansion and pamper her day and night." Laughing wildly, Hu Hai waved his hand. Wisps of dark flame burst out from the iron chains on his wrists and ankles, as they shot noiselessly towards Han Shao Immortal. Countless fiend gods had attached themselves to these iron chains. Their faces were ferocious and twisted, yet they kept chanting verses that advised people to do good. Together with a monstrous evil aura, they leaped towards Han Shao Immortal. When Hu Hai made his move, Fu Su, who had been preparing for a long time, suddenly threw away the longsword in his hand. The pitch-black longsword transformed into a black true dragon and soared into the sky, roaring furiously as it came slashing down towards Han Shao Immortal. Fu Su thrust his palm forward, and a pitch-black painting made of metal suddenly emerged from his palm. A large sheet of dark wind rushed out from the painting, and amidst deafening battle cries, a troop of valiant metal puppets charged out from the dark wind, charging towards Han Shao Immortal. On Yan Dan's palm was an exquisite, bean-sized disc of heavenly Tao transmigration, wheeling faintly. He aimed the tiny disc at Han Shao Immortal, then cried out in a low voice, "The law of heaven and earth, the great Tao of transmigration. Past life and present life, the fate of misfortune is endless." As the disc of heavenly Tao transmigration spun, a crimson flame suddenly burst out from Han Shao Immortal's body. A great amount of Yin flame of karma kept bursting out from his body, burning him and making him howl miserably. What the hell? Yin flame of karma? Han Shao roared furiously, "I've become an immortal. I'm no longer part of the 5 elements, no 3 realms, and no longer controlled by the transmigration of heaven and earth. How could I still be attacked by the Yin flame of karma? This is against the heavens. This is against the heavens." While he was shouting and yelling, Mod, Sun Kuang, Gi Gazi, together with Chu Ping, Zhao Sheng, Tian Wen, Wei Wuji, and a few others, struck at the same time. Without holding back, all of them had drawn out the enormous power contained in their prime magical treasures, unleashing their strongest attacks. Han Shao Immortal did not take the cultivation base of these people seriously. For a heaven immortal, several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators and nearly 1,000 nascent soul cultivators, these ordinary cultivators were just ants that he could kill easily. In Liyuan Galaxy, there was no lack of rumors about some heaven immortal who could easily destroy a city inhabited by cultivators when he was infuriated. Before a heaven immortal, tens of thousands of cultivators, or even hundreds of thousands of cultivators, did not even have the qualification to be cannon fodder. However, the prime magical treasures of Yan Dan and his companions were too powerful, ridiculously powerful. They were all ancient artifacts of spirit artifact grade, and among them, there was even an ancient fiend such as the Banner of Chiyu. Although the cultivation base of Yan Dan and his companions was weak, the power of their magical treasures was simply too powerful. The void trembled, as the 5-colored flame bursting out from Han Zhao's palms shattered abruptly, while countless 5-colored flowers exploded and exploded. Han Shao howled miserably, as both of his palms exploded abruptly. Golden blood sprayed and sprayed all over the sky. Han Shao, who was severely wounded all of a sudden, teleported himself to a place 100 miles away with a blink. The mighty attack unleashed by all of them transformed into a blurry, nearly chaotic shadow, piercing through the void and heading to some unknown place. Han Shao roared furiously, letting out a roar that sounded like the roar of a wounded wild beast. If not because the divine ability of teleportation had become an instinct of his body, allowing him to teleport away with just a single thought of his mind, perhaps he would have been killed by the joint attack unleashed by all of them just now. Han Shao Immortal roared furiously, "What evil technique did you use to injure me?" "Impossible. You are just a bunch of low-grade cultivators, how could you possibly wound me, a Heaven Immortal? Even though I'm just a 36th tier Heaven Immortal, the weakest Heaven Immortal, I'm still an Immortal. It is impossible for cultivators to fight against Immortals. This is an iron law, an iron law. You can never wound me. Unless you have an immortal item, but how could you possibly control an immortal item?" Before Han Shao Immortal's words could fade away, a few powerful immortal pressures suddenly came from the void. A large sheet of pale green light, about the size of a palm and shaped like a crescent moon, came shooting down from the void amidst an ear-splitting whistling noise. All of a sudden, it smashed viciously onto Han Shao Immortal's body. Han Shao, who was in a state of shock from the joint attack unleashed by Yan Dan and the others, suddenly let out a miserable howl, as several dozens of blood arrows shot out from his body. The green beams were very powerful, as they easily wounded Han Shao Immortal, who did not put up any guard, and severely wounded his immortal body. One of his left arms was even chopped off by the green beams, falling to the ground while spraying golden blood. Han Shao roared furiously and painfully, "How shameless! How could you attack me from behind? Zhenmu Sovereign, I know your green mist diffraction sword. I'll definitely repay you for what you've done today in the future." With a blink of his body, Han Shao abruptly teleported to some unknown place. A cloud flickered above his head, as 5 Heaven Immortals, their bodies shrouded in a hazy glow, suddenly flew down from the cloud. 2 of them teleported away with a blink. Obviously, they were chasing after Han Shao. Meanwhile, the other 3 Heaven Immortals landed before Yan Dan and the others, looking around with great astonishment. On the ground, the large energy stone vein opened by Han Shao just now was glinting brilliantly under the sunlight. Chapter 278. The 3 newly arrived Heaven Immortals quickly scanned their surroundings with their divine will, and in just a blink of an eye, they had scanned an area of 5 million miles around them. Following the feedback from their divine will, the 3 Heaven Immortals suddenly burst into wild laughter, rocking back and forth as tears sprayed out from their eyes. One of them, a Heaven Immortal clad in a long robe made of black feathers, his eyes gleaming with a green gleam as he threw his head back and laughed. "The heavens have eyes. There is hope for our spirit flame sect to prosper. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect to find such a good place while tracking that old fogey Han Shao." The other middle-aged man, who was dressed in white, had a pair of triangular eyes and slanted eyebrows that completely destroyed his overall image, suddenly turned around and sneered, "Black-haired ghost, this good place doesn't belong to your spirit flame sect. Friendship is friendship, and benefits are benefits. The Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect wants at least half of the profits here." Standing next to them was a strange old man, who was clad in a long red robe. His hair and eyebrows were dark green, and his face was also green. He had a vertical eye between his eyebrows. He shouted in a deep voice, "Black Feather Sovereign, White Ghost Immortal, listen to me. Old Mu was dragged here by you, and in order to kill that old fogey Han Shao, he ventured deep into the flaming nether ocean and risked his life. For this favor, you will have to return it, and you will have to return it heavily. I can't miss out on any of the benefits here." Abruptly, the erect eye between his brows opened, and a famous itinerant Heaven Immortal in Liyuan Galaxy, Zhenmu Sovereign, who called himself Old Wood, shot out a large sheet of green light from all 3 eyes, illuminating Black Feather Sovereign from Spirit Flame Sect and White Ghost Immortal from Iron Ghost Soul Seizing Sect. Zhenmu Sovereign snapped sternly, "What is this place?" "The famous flaming nether ocean in the minor heavenly circle realm. For the sake of my friendship with the 2 of you, I, Old Mu, risked the danger to follow you here, to hunt down Han Shao. Aren't you ashamed to not give me 30% of the profits?" The Black Feather Sovereign and the White Ghost Immortal bellowed angrily in unison, "Bullshit. That stinks. You are a loner, while we have a huge business. We have tens of thousands of disciples to feed. 30% of the profits? 5 points at most. Shenmu's sovereign grinned coldly. All of a sudden, countless tiny wisterias shot out from his body, stretching quickly towards the ground and implanting themselves into countless trees. The forest around him shook, and a huge amount of spirit wood aura flowed into his body through the wood wisteria. Shenmu's sovereign's face had turned into a strange, pale green color. Suddenly, a large layer of wood emerged on his skin, glinting with a gleam that only metal could have under the sunlight. Shenmu's sovereign's voice had also become extremely strange, sounding like two pieces of wood rubbing against each other. He shouted in a hoarse voice, "You better think it through. The two of you are only tier 36th tier heaven immortals, while I, Old Mu, already has 1 foot in the realm of tier 35th tier heaven immortal. Be it the power of his Tao technique or his cultivation base, he is at least 2 times stronger than the two of you. With twice the amount of magic power, this old man can easily slaughter you all." Off in the distance, 2 figures were seen flashing at top speed. A man and a woman, who were chasing after Han Shao Immortal just now, suddenly appeared. The man was clad in a heart-covering golden armor. Apart from the armor that covered his heart, there was nothing else on his upper body. A large patch of fair skin was exposed, densely covered with countless red flame patterns. As for the woman, her face was as pale as a piece of paper, and her body was enshrouded in a ghostly aura. The left side of her body was fleshy, giving her the appearance of an enchanting beauty, while the right side of her body was simply a pale skeleton. The man clad in the heart-covering golden armor came and stood behind Black Feather Sovereign. Suddenly, wisps of flame rushed out from his body. He stared at Shenmu Sovereign, sneered and said, "Old wood, you better think it through. Although your cultivation base is stronger than us, the cultivation technique of Spirit Flame Sect happens to be able to restrain all wood element spells under the heaven. Even if we join hands, I don't think you can defeat us." Shenmu Sovereign gave the man a cold glance, then murmured under his breath, "Inferno Sovereign, hee." On the other side, the woman who looked like a ghost came and stood right next to White Ghost Immortal, her arms naturally wrapped around White Ghost Immortal's arm with a sharp contrast. She let out a strange laugh and said, "Shenmu Sovereign, if I, Ghost Lady, join hands with Senior Brother, together with Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign, we should have a chance to kill you, right?" Shenmu Sovereign looked around and said with a cold grin, "Where is Han Shao, that old fogey? Ghost Lady, he had offended you severely in those years. Therefore, after discovering his whereabouts, you gathered us and followed him all the way here, trying to find a chance to kill him. But now, it looks like..." Ghost Lady snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, "That old fogey may not have any other abilities, but his escaping skill is pretty good." Shenmu Sovereign laughed wildly and said, "I see. So, you guys failed to kill him. Ha ha ha, Han Shao, listen carefully, I'm very interested in this priceless planet. Why don't you join hands with me and seize 50% of the benefits from this planet? Both of us are lone cultivators, so if we seize 50% of the benefits, we can establish our own sect, or improve our cultivation base alone. In any case, we can get endless benefits. Of this 50%, I'll take 30%, and you'll take 20%. It's fair and reasonable. What do you say?" Shenmu Sovereign's voice echoed through the heaven and earth, coming from every corner of the planet at the same time. Then came Han Zhao's voice, "Shenmu, old fogey, if you really want to join hands with me, swear an oath." The faces of White Ghost Immortal and the other 3 fell instantly. While they were about to open their mouths to stop him, Shenmu Sovereign had already sworn an oath with his prime nascent divinity. Han Zhao's laughter was heard coming from afar. After that, a figure flashed past, and in the next moment, Han Shao had already appeared next to Shenmu Sovereign. Han Shao Immortal, whose body was still dripping with blood, took out a pill bottle indifferently and swallowed a few healing pills. After that, he turned to Shenmu Sovereign, smiled and said, "All right, let's work together and seize the benefits. As for the fact that you plotted against me, I won't hold it against you anymore." With a sway of his body, a brand new arm grew out from the spot where Han Zhao's arm was chopped off. He exercised the new arm, then suddenly grinned at Ghost Lady, who had an unsightly expression on her face. Old hag, I've merely seized 3 of your disciples and used them as cultivation vessels. I didn't kill them in the end, and I've returned them to them. Why are you still chasing after me? With a cold voice, Ghost Lady said, those 3 disciples were the best materials that I wanted to cultivate into my natal heavenly ghosts. But in the end, they were seized by you, and their innate supreme energy was taken away by you. Without that supreme energy, I could only refine them into 9 ghost mothers, which is at least 10 times weaker than the natal heavenly ghosts. You spoiled this old woman's plans. This enmity, this hatred, this old woman will never let you off. Suddenly, Zhenmu's sovereign spoke. Han Shao, listen carefully. This time, White Ghost Immortal accidentally found an immortal item, the star positioning needle. No matter where he is, he can always point to the position of a certain star. It is a gold immortal treasure that came from an upper heavenly realm. Black Feather Sovereign found a dark purple energy banana leaf, which can resist the soul-dispersing heavenly flame. That's why we followed you all the way here. Zhenmu's Sovereign gave White Ghost Immortal and Black Feather Sovereign a greedy look, then grinned hideously and said, if we really want to fight, Ghost Lady, this old hag, can be released, and Inferno Sovereign can leave her alone. But, White Ghost Immortal and Black Feather Sovereign must stay. Killing people and seizing their treasures, how delightful is that? That banana leaf belongs to me, and you can have the star positioning needle. Han Shao sneered and said, it's fair and reasonable, let's do it this way. Which one should I kill first? A large sheet of green cold air spread out from Han Xiao's body, while 3 pale green pearls were wheeling and shimmering around him, unleashing a great amount of ice and snowflakes to protect him. Han Xiao waved his hand, and a delicate and exquisite flower basket made from purple bamboo threads appeared in his hand. Inside the flower basket were several hundred kinds of tiny and strange flowers, each and every one of them looked vivid and lifelike, as if they had just been plucked from their branches. Zhenmu's Sovereign let out a strange laugh, as a large sheet of green light burst out from his body, transforming into several dozens of crescent-shaped, palm-sized sword beams, wheeling and wheeling around him, like a flock of the most agile birds dancing around their nests. Then, Yen Dan and the others began to retreat. They were all experienced men, and from the words of a few heaven immortals, they could tell that this group of people were not from the righteous league, but were all evil immortals who were cruel and merciless, and had no moral bottom line. Perhaps, with the combined forces of all the dynasties, they could still deal with one heaven immortal. However, 6 heaven immortals were here, and one of them was Zhenmu's Sovereign, who had 1 foot stepped into the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal. If they continued to participate in the matter here, it would be no different from courting death. Under the command of Yen Dan and the others, the cultivators and demons from various dynasties left quickly and quietly, without making any noise. Hiding in a grass nest, Wu Qi was surprised to find that the cultivators from 6 dynasties did not split up, but retreated westward at the same time. Judging from the situation, it seemed they were retreating to the same place. Suddenly, Wu Qi had a very strange premonition. Could it be that the appearance of these heaven immortals would force all the dynasties to join forces? But, when he gave it a careful thought, it was not impossible. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi saw the 6 heaven immortals in the sky were at daggers drawn, and the atmosphere was getting tenser and tenser. Suddenly, Wu Qi plunged into the ground and quickly rushed to the side of Jiang Qingzi, who had fallen to the ground, blood all over his body, and was at his last gasp. Grabbing Jiang Qingzi with one hand, Wu Qi transformed into a stream of yellow mist and plunged into the ground at top speed. Abruptly, Han Shao Immortal noticed Wu Qi's movement. He waved his hand and shot out a beam of colorful light, causing several dozens of exotic flowers in the basket to sway and sway. Countless colorful petals spun and spun at top speed, then shot down with a strong aroma and a blinding light, smashing viciously onto the spot where Jiang Qingzi was lying just now. Wu Qi, who was fleeing at top speed with Jiang Qingzi, had never expected that the attack of a true heaven immortal could be so frightening, and that his reaction speed was so fast. It was dozens of times faster than Ingzheng and the other nascent divinity cultivators, and the strength of the attack was at least 100 times stronger. The several miles thick rock layer above his head was sliced open like a hot knife through butter. Suddenly, the blinding five-colored beam, together with countless petals, smashed viciously onto Wu Qi's body. A miserable howl echoed out, as Wu Qi's body flickered and suddenly exploded into countless specks of light that shot out in all directions. 1,000 miles away, Wu Qi's body suddenly reappeared. He cursed under his breath, clenched his jaws tightly, and continued flying forward. Inside Wu Qi's dantian, the soul replacement puppet, which he had spent a long time refining with his blood essence, had completely disintegrated and vanished without a trace. Inside the spirit breeding ring, Jiang Qingzi stared blankly at the 100 tall and burly longbow men, and could not come to his senses for a long while. Chapter 279. Inside the cave, a small bonfire was burning weakly, emitting a dim red glow. The glow was more than enough for Wu Qi. In his eyes, the pitch-dark cave was now as bright as day. He spat out some saliva and mixed the spirit pills with it, turning them into a paste. After that, he put both of Jiang Qingzi's broken arms back to their original position, and tied them up tightly with silk ribbons, making him look like a mummy. When he snatched Jiang Qingzi just now, Wu Qi conveniently brought both of his arms away from the ground. Right after he shoved them into the spirit breeding ring, Han Shao Immortal's strike nearly shattered Wu Qi to pieces. Fortunately, he was protected by a soul replacement puppet. When the magical puppet died on its own, Wu Qi's true body was teleported 1,000 miles away in a blink of an eye, where he reformed his body. If not for the soul replacement puppet, Han Shao Immortal would have long killed Wu Qi with a strike. Whenever he thought of the frightening pressure Han Shao Immortal felt when the strike was about to land, Wu Qi's legs were still trembling with lingering fear. He was too reckless, too reckless. It was just his instinct that made him want to save Jiang Qingzi, and in the end, he nearly got himself killed. He would never do something like this again, and if he wanted to do it again, he would have to get himself a few more soul replacement puppets. That old fool Lu Buwei still has a few more of them. I have to get them at all costs. Wu Qi made up his mind. In the past, with the magical escape art and the precious treasures he carried, he had the confidence to stay alive even when facing a nascent divinity cultivator. But now, a few heaven immortals had suddenly arrived, and after personally experiencing their frightening strength, Wu Qi dared not to be careless anymore. The solemn warning found in Scroll of Stealing slowly flowed across Wu Qi's heart like flowing water, branding each and every word clearly in his mind. An absolute overall strength was more than enough to nullify the magical effects of all the mystic techniques in Scroll of Stealing. Even if he had gathered the innate 5 elements and cultivated the innate escape art of 5 elements, he still had to be extremely careful and cautious. There were countless almighty experts under the heaven, and before Wu Qi possessed the ultimate overall strength, there were countless existences who could easily kill him with just a single thought, as long as they began to pay attention to Wu Qi in their hearts. After almost dying once, Wu Qi kept the warning in Scroll of Stealing in his mind. He kept telling himself that he could never be as abrupt and reckless as he was today. After reconnecting Jiang Qingzi's arms, Wu Qi gently removed a storage pouch from his belt. Poor, really poor. Vaguely, the mystic eyes of universe shone with a colorful light and shone through Jiang Qingzi's body. Wu Qi could vaguely see the 5 feet and 7 inches tall innate nascent embryo in Jiang Qingzi's body. This was already an innate talent of a genius level in cultivation. A 5 feet and 7 inches tall innate nascent embryo, when transformed into a nascent divinity in the future, would have the innate talent of a heaven immortal. On the other hand, his innate nascent embryo was densely covered with tiny cracks, glinting with a faint golden light. This proved that Jiang Qingzi's nascent soul had completely fused with his innate nascent embryo, and he had the cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. However, in order to escape, he had burned his nascent soul and blood essence, which had severely damaged his nascent soul and caused cracks to appear on his innate nascent embryo. Looking at the fist-sized nascent soul in Jiang Qingzi's body, which was glowing dimly and looked like it could vanish at any time, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. If he was not careful enough, Jiang Qingzi might have regressed back to the realm of Jin Dan. An earth immortal who once had the cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm was actually wearing a storage bag, and did not even have a storage ring. It was not wrong to say that he was poor. He pinched the sachet with his fingers, then cast a spirit-breaking spell he learned from Scroll of Stealing and broke the not-so-exquisite restrictive spell on the sachet. When he sent his divine will into the bag, Wu Qi could not help but feel disappointed. This bag was of a higher grade than the 2 bags Wu Qi stole in the past. It had the storage space of about 7 to 8 rooms, but it could never be compared with a storage ring. The bag was filled with all kinds of miscellaneous items. Wu Qi counted with his divine will and found out that there were a total of 137 pieces of lower-grade energy stones, and 3 pieces of middle-grade energy stones. There were also over 40 pill bottles, all filled with lower-grade and middle-grade pills such as energy-replenishing pills, blood-replenishing pills, and golden blade pills. As for the higher-grade pills such as energy-replenishing pills and energy-replenishing pills, there were only 5 bottles, with a total of 38 pills. Apart from that, there were all kinds of scrap metal ores, which did not even have the qualification to be used as flooring in the craftsman workshops of Great Yen Dynasty. For example, purple copper, purple gold, silver essence, gold essence, and some others. Their impurities were more than 70%, and the effective content was less than 30%. On top of that, there were piles and piles of herbs, which were carefully stored in cold jade and warm jade boxes. They were all around 300 to 400 years old, and there was only one spirit herb that was 500 years old, a white ginseng of inferior quality. A white ginseng that was around 550 years old could be used to concoct the marrow replenishing pill, which could replenish one's energy and improve one's cultivation base. It could also provide some minor benefits to nascent soul cultivators. This white ginseng was carefully stored in a jade box made from upper-grade energy jade, and 3 restrictive talismans were stuck on it, as they were afraid that the energy and medicinal properties of the ginseng would disperse. Wu Qi could not help but smack his lips. A white ginseng that was 550 years old. What a pity. When Wu Qi was in Wanying Dragon King's Dragon King mansion, he saw that what those shrimp soldiers and crab generals used to feed the dragon beasts that pulled the chariots in the Dragon King mansion was a white ginseng that was at least 3,000 years old. Consuming a white ginseng that was at least 3,000 years old could strengthen the blood essence of the dragon beasts, strengthen their bones, and make them more energetic, allowing them to give birth to better offspring. Poor as a beggar. Wu Qi gave the unconscious Jiang Qingzi a glance, threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh. It was obvious that Jiang Qingzi was very poor. Just like Jiang Qingzi, those few heaven immortals were extremely poor. No wonder Han Shao, a mighty heaven immortal, would lose his composure just because of a tiny energy stone mine. Apparently, they were just a group of poor men, and when they suddenly came to a place that was filled with natural treasures, they lost their composure. It looks like I'm going to be in deep trouble. Those few fellows are not people from the righteous path. Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown. He restored the restrictive spell on the storage bag, then hung it on Jiang Qingzi's waist. He grabbed a few grass leaves from the ground, kneaded them into a thin thread, and lit it near the bonfire. After that, Wu Qi brought the thread that was emitting a strong and pungent smoke near Jiang Qingzi's nose. Jiang Qingzi sneezed and woke up in a sorry state. He stared blankly at the pitch-dark cave ceiling, shook his head, smiled bitterly, and said, "I must have been dreaming just now. I actually saw 100 longbow people who had long gone extinct in minor heavenly circle realm. Ha ha ha, I must have been dreaming. And they even knocked me out." Wu Qi cleared his throat, rose to his feet, cupped his fist and bowed to Jiang Qingzi. "Senior, I'm Wu Qi. Nice to meet you." Jiang Qingzi struggled to straighten his upper body. He looked at his tightly bound hands, and sensed the cool sensation coming from the wounds on his arms. He could not help but praise, "A good pill." The strength of this pill is really strong. After that, he quickly nodded to Wu Qi and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'm Jiangqing Zi, the leader of White Cloud Immortal Sect's Spirit Gathering Palace. Nice to meet you." Looking at the bloody wounds on his arms, Jiangqing Zi smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist, it was you who saved me? I can't thank you enough. Judging from your cultivation base, you are only at the early stage of Jin Dan realm. How did you manage to escape from those few old fools?" Wu Qi spread his arms and said honestly, "I was nearly killed by them. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to find a soul replacement puppet." Jiangqing Zi sucked in a deep breath, staring at Wu Qi in horror as he cried out, "Soul replacement puppet? The kind of soul replacement puppet that could save its master from a fatal disaster? Fellow Taoist, you are indeed a man blessed with a great destiny. It has been a long time since I've heard of such a rare treasure in the entire minor heavenly circle realm." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then sat down cross-legged in front of Jiangqing Zi and asked in a deep voice, "Let me make a long story short. I'll just ask one question at a time. Those 6 heaven immortals, Han Shao, Jinmu Sovereign, White Ghost Immortal, Ghost Lady, Black Feather Sovereign, and Inferno Sovereign, don't they seem to be from the righteous path?" Jiangqing Zi pursed his lips and said with a wry smile, "Not only are they not from the righteous path, they are simply..." Sighing, Jiangqing Zi shook his head and began to introduce the background of these 6 heaven immortals. Both Han Shao Immortal and Jinmu Sovereign were renowned itinerant heaven immortals in Liyuan Galaxy, and both of them were immortals who walked the evil path with a notorious reputation. What they were best at was being tyrannical and committing all kinds of evil deeds. Both of them once had the experience of slaughtering an entire city inhabited by cultivators, all for the sake of seizing an insignificant energy stone vein or some spirit herb. White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady were the 2 ancestral masters of Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect in Myriad Ghost Planet. Both of them were infamous heaven immortals from the evil path. They were overbearing, unreasonable, and notorious for seeking revenge for the slightest grievance. Once a feud was formed, they would seek revenge even after thousands of years or tens of thousands of years. Furthermore, they were a pair of husband and wife, who had been cultivating together since the beginning of their cultivation. When 2 heaven immortals joined hands, few people in Liyuan Galaxy dared to offend them. Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign were the founding ancestral masters of Spirit Flame Sect, another major immortal sect in Liyuan Galaxy. Both of them possessed the cultivation base of 36th tier heaven immortals. Spirit Flame Sect specialized in the cultivation technique of fire element, and was an expert in crafting various spirit weapons and magical treasures. Their forte was a type of earthly flame divine thunder, which was powerful enough to shatter mountains and shatter mountains. It was the most famous thunderbolt magical treasure in Liyuan Galaxy. This pair of heaven immortals were fellow disciples of the same sect, and they had a habit of never seeing anything good. Once they saw any natural treasures, they would get them, even if it meant killing a whole city. In Liyuan Galaxy, there were 13 immortal sects from the righteous path, 7 immortal sects from the evil path, and hundreds of cultivator clans and cities. These 6 heaven immortals were the fiercest and most troublesome existences in the entire Liyuan Galaxy. Only the 2 major sects, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, whose overall strength was far superior to them, could afford to offend them. Because of that, these 2 immortal sects each had 3 ancestral masters of Heaven Immortal Realm. White Cloud Immortal Sect was an expert in the Tao of alchemy, and 70% of all spirit pills and miraculous medicines in Liyuan Galaxy were supplied by White Cloud Immortal Sect. Therefore, they had a very good relationship with many people. Tranquil Vimla Sect practiced a unique cultivation technique, and they were known for their divine ability, the Tranquil Heart Cleansing Melody, which could restrain all kinds of evil cultivation techniques. Therefore, it was a very powerful deterrent to immortals from the evil path. With the 2 major immortal sects joining hands, they sat firmly on the chief position of the righteous immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy. On the other hand, Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect were the symbol of the evil immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy. Meanwhile, Han Shao Immortal and Zhenmu Sovereign were the representatives of the evil forces among all itinerant cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy. After listening to Jiang Qingzi's introduction, Wu Qi slapped the ground next to him and cried out in a deep voice, "So, this planet." Jiang Qingzi looked at Wu Qi honestly, smiled bitterly and said, "It seems this planet has not been destroyed or exploited by cultivators, so its value is beyond estimation. Now that it is targeted by those 6 heaven immortals, I'm afraid, we can either submit to them and become their disciples and servants, or perish together with them." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then fished out several large alloy plates from Black Dragon's spirit ring, and quickly assembled them into the blueprint of a small teleportation formation. After embedding energy stones into the blueprint, Wu Qi carried Jiang Qingzi up and stepped into the teleportation formation. Chapter 280. With a cold snort, a gray and white spirit beam soared into the sky from behind Yan Dan's back. It looked like he was about to unleash the disk of heavenly Dao transmigration. A few satellite cities, several dozens of towns, and several thousand small villages outside Ji City were instantly turned into ashes by the divine ability and magical technique unleashed by Lord Flaming Inferno. In just a blink of an eye, a population of several million people had vanished into thin air. Standing behind Yan Dan, Su Qin's face was pale as he looked at the lava lake outside the city. He murmured under his breath, "Poor, poor, those few fat pigs and skinny horses in my house, poor, poor." Xiang Yu's wrist shook violently, and the sword in his hand was shattered by the white dragon-shaped energy beams. Then, the 36 dragon-shaped energy beams smashed viciously into his chest, shattering his armor and leaving a hole the size of a water bucket on his chest. A large sheet of scorching white light sprinkled onto Xiang Yu's body, burning his skin and making it sizzling noises. In just a blink of an eye, the skin on his chest was charred, exposing his translucent bones. Yan Dan was taken aback, then he turned his head and looked at Wu Qi in horror. Yan Dan and the others looked at each other, unable to say a word. Cracking noises kept ringing out, as the restrictive spells above Ji City were shattered layer by layer. Countless runes condensed from natural energies exploded and exploded, filling the sky with colorful beams. Countless common people in Ji City dropped to their knees, looking up into the sky and praying. They had no idea what was happening. Coldly glancing around, Jiang Qingzi sneered and said, "Fellow Taoist Wu Qi is my savior. I'll take on anyone who has enmity with him." What kind of thoughts could these poor cultivators have when they suddenly came to this planet that was rich in natural energies and natural resources? Xiang Yu opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of blood. His body was knocked far away by the white light, and he fell heavily onto a collapsed house. He raised his head and looked at the 6 heaven immortals, whose faces were filled with ferocious expressions. Yan Dan shook his head and said, "What do you think we should do about this?" Yan Dan spun his head abruptly, clenched his teeth and roared, "Retreat? The people of Ji City is..." Jiang Qingzi roared angrily, "How dare you? How dare you hurt my benefactor in front of me?" The ribbons on Jiang Qingzi's broken arm suddenly broke apart inch by inch. Jiang Qingzi casually waved his hand, untied his belt, and shook it forcefully. Suddenly, his 6 feet long belt unraveled and transformed into a 6 feet long, 7 feet wide talisman that shone with a white light. Wu Qi continued, "I know that all of you have collected a lot of good things over the years. For example, we, Great Yen, have dozens of acquired spirit pearls. These precious treasures must never be exposed to the public, or else, our entire clan will be wiped out. Unless you have the confidence to join hands and kill 6 heaven immortals. Your Majesty, quickly send someone to transfer all the treasures in Great Yan's treasury. Just leave behind a batch of energy stones and spirit herbs that are under 3,000 years old. These 6 heaven immortals are the most notorious evil immortals in Liyuan Galaxy. They are unscrupulous, and are capable of doing anything. In the 6 dynasties, a cultivator with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm who had stepped into the realm of nascent divinity was already at the level of an important minister like Li Si and Su Fu. Yet, he only brought a shabby storage bag with him. Needless to say, Wu Qi could easily tell how poor the cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy were with just a single glance. The spirit dragon deity subduing talisman was still emitting a dazzling white light, and no one knew whether Xiang Yu was still alive or not. Among the emperors and ministers of various dynasties, there were many who hated Wu Qi to the core. However, facing the threat of the talisman, none of them, including Lu Buwei, made a sound, pretending that they did not hear Jiang Chengxi's words. Ghost Lady's hoarse and unpleasant voice echoed through the void as she cried out, "Remove the restrictive spell and join our sect, and you'll still have a chance to live. Otherwise, we'll kill all of you and turn your nascent divinity into Yin ghosts, making you unable to be reincarnated forever. As for that young fellow named Chu Ping, you are also cultivating the technique of Yin deity and ghost. You can join our Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect, and you'll be able to ascend and become an immortal in the future. Isn't that great?" The emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties looked at the storage bag hanging on Jiang Chengxi's waist with a strange look in their eyes. A loud boom rang out, as a tower located at the northwest corner of Ji City suddenly exploded. It was a tower that controlled the defensive mechanism of Ji City. There were several hundred cultivators standing on top of the tower. When the tower exploded, the defensive mechanism suffered a backlash and sent several hundred cultivators flying away while howling miserably. Amidst the blinding light, their bodies disintegrated into a rain of blood that blotted the sky. Golden characters were written on the talisman, and like a swimming dragon, a complicated talisman was drawn in one go. Jiang Chengxi injected what little energy he had into the talisman, causing it to emit a large sheet of white light. Abruptly, a dragon roar rang out, as 36 white spirit beams, each as thick as an arm and shaped like dragons, rushed out from the talisman, thrusting towards Xiang Yu with a scorching hot aura. Grabbing Jiang Chengxi with one hand, Wu Qi sprung up into the sky. Hastily, he transmitted his voice to all the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties, "Do not show your precious treasures in front of anyone, or we will be killed for sure. The planet under our feet is located in the minor heavenly circle realm, Liyuan Galaxy. Generations of cultivators have mined all the energy veins in the galaxy, and the cultivators nowadays are as poor as beggars. Not to mention your prime magical treasures, even an upper-grade energy stone is enough to make these heaven immortals want to kill you." Wu Qi stared at Jiang Chengxi in astonishment. His waist was actually a talisman. And judging from its power, it could severely injure Xiang Yu, just like the demon-subduing talisman that severely wounded Wanying Dragon King, a spirit talisman personally crafted by a heaven immortal. Wu Qi had made a mistake, as he was too engrossed in Jiang Chengxi's storage bag that he forgot to search his body. As the leader of Spirit Gathering Palace in White Cloud Immortal Sect, how could Jiang Chengxi not have a trump card that could save his own life? Before Yan Dan's words could fade away, a sword suddenly thrust towards Wu Qi's chest from the side. Clad in a heavy armor, his skin glinting with a blood-red gleam, Xiang Yu cried out fiercely, "Despicable villain! Hand over your life!" Xiang Yu sprung up and launched an attack. Like a bolt of lightning, the sword arrived before Wu Qi's chest in a blink of an eye. Suddenly, a cracking noise rang out from the restrictive barrier above his head, as a large sheet of red flame burst out from Inferno Lord's body, making him look like a flaming man as he plunged down from the sky, crouching on top of the barrier and crazily burning it. Red and sticky flames kept rushing out from Inferno's sovereign's body like lava, spreading across the defensive barrier of Ji City, and gradually flowing to the ground outside the city. Yan Dan's expression flickered. He casually pointed his finger down at the imperial palace. Without hesitation, Ma Yi brought a few eunuchs and transformed into beams of light and descended to the ground, rushing along the street towards the imperial palace. "Your Majesty, please make a decision now." Wu Qi stared at the 6 ferocious evil immortals hovering above his head and cried out, "6 heaven immortals, do we still have a chance to resist them? If not, we have to retreat now." Wu Qi raised his head up hastily, and saw that all the defensive barriers of Ji City had been activated. Several tens of miles away in the sky, Yan Dan and the other emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties were hovering in midair, staring nervously at the 6 clumps of clouds outside the barrier. Hovering high up in the sky, Han Shao Immortal and the rest of the evil immortals kept letting out wild, complacent laughs. Occasionally, they would casually strike down, causing the defensive barriers of G City to vibrate violently, and the ground around G City would slowly sink several tens of feet down while producing a shrill and unpleasant grating noise. The teleportation formation lit up, as Wu Qi walked out from a dry well behind one of the residences in G City with Jiangqing Zi in his hand. Once the disk of heavenly Dao transmigration appeared, there would be no living person left in G City. These 6 evil immortals would definitely kill them and seize their treasures, then silence them. The precious treasures carried by Yan Dan and the others were simply too tempting. Even a Buddha might not be able to restrain the greed in his heart, let alone these few evil immortals who were greedy and murderous by nature. The temperature of the flame was extremely high, and when it touched the ground, it would immediately turn into boiling lava. Not long after that, G City was surrounded by a rolling lava lake that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. As far as the eye could see, the entire area was filled with crimson lava and raging flame. Apart from the red color, nothing else could be seen. Wu Qi was frightened out of his wits. The disk of heavenly Dao transmigration was a precious treasure left behind from the ancient times, and its power was not weaker than an innate spirit treasure. Han Shao Immortal, Ghost Lady, and the rest of the evil immortals were all extremely poor people. Their eyes would turn green when they saw some spirit herbs and energy stones. If they saw the disk of heavenly Dao transmigration, the banner of Qiyu, the copy of river map, and other precious treasures, wouldn't they go crazy? The emperors and ministers of other dynasties were struck with terror, and they quickly turned to look at Wu Qi. Without saying anything, Wu Qi pointed his finger at the storage bag hanging on Jiangqing Zi's waist and continued speaking through voice transmission. This Jiangqing Zi is the leader of the Spirit Gathering Palace, the strongest immortal sect in Liyuan Galaxy, the White Cloud Immortal Sect. He has a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm, and he only has a little over 100 middle and lower grade energy stones with him. He doesn't even have an upper grade energy stone. He doesn't even have a storage ring, and he is still using a storage bag. Obviously, the talisman could not be used against heaven immortals, and that was why Jiangqing Zi did not use it against Han Shao Immortal. However, for any cultivators below the realm of heaven immortal, the talisman clearly had the power to kill them with one strike. While panting heavily, Jiangqing Zi put away the talisman, gave it a careful look at its bright gleam, smiled bitterly at Wu Qi, and said, "I can still use it 2 more times. After that, I can't use this spirit dragon deity suppressing talisman anymore." Wu Qi was taken aback. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Xiang Yu would strike at him at this moment. He had no time to react, and could only watch helplessly as the sword in Xiang Yu's hand thrust down towards his heart, slowly approaching his body. Yan Dan's expression fell. He waved his hand and cried out sternly, "Retreat! All members of Imperial Clan and members of powerful clans, retreat at full speed." A quarter of an hour later, the last defensive tower in G City was completely destroyed. 6 evil immortals descended slowly from the sky while laughing aloud. Chu Ping pressed his palm on Yan Dan's shoulder and cried out in a deep voice, "As long as the Emperor and ministers of Great Yan are alive, Great Yan is alive. As long as the Emperor and ministers of Great Yan are dead, Great Yan will perish." Because of the war between Great Yan and Daqin in Meng Mountains, Great Yan had deployed a great number of teleportation formations of strategic level in G City. As the blinding light of the teleportation formation kept flashing, the members of Great Yan Imperial Clan and the members of influential clans of Great Yan were teleporting to Meng Mountains through the teleportation formation. After that, they were teleported to the territory of Great Chu through another teleportation formation. In G City, all the teleportation formations exploded at the same time, turning into a pile of scrap metal. Wu Qi shot a beam of light at one of the teleportation formations, causing the other teleportation formation on the other end to crack and lose its function. After that, he carried Jiangqing Zi and leaped out from the dry well, sprinting quickly towards Mighty Marshall Avenue. But before he could take 2 steps, a loud boom suddenly rang out from the sky, and the ground began to shake violently. The houses around him collapsed one after another, and the miserable howls of countless people in G City soared into the sky. Countless deep and shallow cracks of various sizes were opened up on the ground, while soil vapor soared up into the sky from underground. It was a horrible scene that looked no different than the end of the world. Standing next to Yen Dan, Fu Su, the crown prince of Qin, extended his hand and grabbed Jiang Qingzi. He scanned through Jiang Qingzi's body with his divine will, and discovered that Jiang Qingzi's body was glinting brilliantly with a golden gleam. It was 5 feet and 7 inches tall, but it was actually an innate nascent embryo that was riddled with scars. Fu Su nodded his head slowly, breathed out a long sigh, and said, "You indeed have the cultivation base of peak stage Xiantian realm. It's just that you've used a mystic technique to burn your energy essence and nascent soul, which has damaged your foundation." Chapter 281. In Meng Mountains, on the peak of the mountain guarded by heaven-breaking sword sect, Wu Qi was holding Princess Zhanglu in his arms, frowning as he looked at the rising sun in the east. Gently stroking Princess Zhangli's slender waist, Wu Qi said with a deep voice, "Retreat with the other members of the imperial clan immediately. It's not safe here. Remember, you can't leave the crown prince's side. Only by following him will you be safe." When the members of the imperial clan of Great Yen retreated to Great Chu, Yen Qijuan followed suit. As the crown prince of Great Yen, Yen Qijuan's staying in Great Chu could play a role in calming the hearts of the people. The reason why Wu Qi asked Princess Zhanglu to stay close to Yen Qijuan was that he feared she might be killed by someone in Great Chu. Xiang Yu and Wu Qi had a grudge against each other for stealing his wife, and Xiang Yu's influence in Great Chu was deeply rooted. Even if he was fighting in Meng Mountains, there were countless people in Great Chu who could stand up for him and make things difficult for Princess Zhanglu. Zhanglu frowned, stared at Wu Qi, and cried out in a low voice, "What are you doing here? Those people are all heaven immortals." Wu Qi lowered his head and looked at Princess Zhanglu. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "I have my reasons for staying here." Princess Zhanglu still wanted to say something, but when she saw the determined look in Wu Qi's eyes, she had no choice but to shut her mouth obediently. Taking a deep breath, Princess Zhanglu stood on tiptoe and kissed Wu Qi on the lips. After that, she said in a low voice, "Zi Xian will wait for you in Great Chu. You must be safe. Zi Xian will cultivate seriously. Once I possess the strength of a heaven immortal, I will definitely wipe out the entire clan of those 6 evil immortals." With her head held high, Princess Zhanglu flew into Little Meng City, escorted by a large group of cultivators and guards, and stepped into the teleportation formation that led to Great Chu. All the teleportation formations in Little Meng City were blinking with blinding lights, using the fastest speed to teleport a large number of elite soldiers and lower-level cultivators away. Those who were qualified to stay in Little Meng City and participate in the war were at least cultivators of nascent soul realm and above. Cultivators like Wu Qi, with his Jin Dan cultivation base, who were willing to stay, were extremely rare. Faced with the frightening overall strength of heaven immortals, any casual strike from them could turn an area of 10,000 miles into a wasteland. The tactic of overwhelming numbers was useless against heaven immortals. Therefore, they could only rely on a small number of elites, relying on the Mo City personally crafted by MOD, to gather all the underground energy veins beneath Meng Mountains and fight the 6 heaven immortals. The emperors and ministers of the 6 countries were all extremely proud people. They absolutely could not tolerate bowing their heads and admitting defeat to the enemy just like that. Even if they lost, they had to do their best before lowering their heads that were held high in the air. When Ing Zheng, whose bone marrow was nearly sucked dry by Su Meier and had his vitality greatly damaged, heard the news, he brought Daqin and rushed to the scene. Wei Liao, Sima Qiu, Fan Zhu, and many other famous ministers of Wu Qi had arrived. How could a mighty hero like Ing Zheng miss such a grand occasion when all the dynasties joined hands to fight against heaven immortals? MOD had opened up all the defensive mechanisms of Mo City, and all the famous ministers and valiant generals from various dynasties who were experts in the Tao of item crafting, formation, talisman, and defensive mechanisms had joined the battle, using all their efforts to strengthen and stabilize Mo City. In just half a month, Mo City had gone through a tremendous transformation. Both the defense and offense of Mo City had been improved by a few times. During this period of time, 6 evil immortals had crossed the border like a swarm of locusts. After conquering G City, they immediately looted all the treasuries in the cities around G City, crazily looting all the resources found in the mines and energy veins. As heaven immortals, the divine abilities and magical powers they possessed were far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. With just a casual wave of their hand, they could loot all the energy stones and metal ores found in a large energy vein. In the end, as the storage treasures carried by these 6 evil immortals were simply too full, and they had no more suitable storage treasures to store all the energy stones and energy ores, they had no choice but to stop the looting. In order to craft a storage ring, it required a special technique of crafting, and some special materials, as well as a long period of time to form a stable storage space. How could these 6 evil immortals, who were like mice who had fallen into a rice vat, have the time to craft a storage ring? After a round of unbridled looting and barely appeasing their greedy desire, the 6 evil immortals teleported all the way to Meng Mountains according to the confession they had obtained from some people of G City through torture. However, because they had spent 15 days looting the mines and other resources near G City, they had given Yan Dan and the others 15 days of precious time to prepare for the upcoming attack. When Han Shao and the other evil immortals arrived at Meng Mountains, what appeared in front of them was a steel city, hovering on top of a pillar of earth flame, measuring over 10 miles in circumference. It was forged using various precious metals, its surface engraved with countless runes and restrictive spells, and was densely covered with countless formations and traps. Mo City. All the famous ministers and valiant generals of 6 dynasties had gathered in Mo City, assuming a stance of fighting to the death with these 6 evil immortals. Apart from Wu Qi, a man with unknown intentions, and Jiangqing Zi, who had self-ignited his blood essence and nascent soul, causing his cultivation base to nearly drop to Jin Dan realm, there was no cultivator below mid-stage nascent soul realm in Mo City. There were over 100 cultivators of nascent divinity realm, over 10,000 earth immortals of nascent soul realm, 36 giant undead warriors of Great Chu, and countless strange forces, such as wild ghosts and deities. This was the formation of the allied army that appeared before Han Shao and the other evil immortals. Wu Qi was standing at the edge of Mo City, leaning against a metal battlement, carefully keeping a certain distance from Xiang Yu, Lu Buwei, Duke of Longyang, and the others. Later, when the war broke out, if Xiang Yu found a chance to give him a stab, Wu Qi would not be like Xiang Yu, who could survive after having a large hole pierced through his chest, and would be able to jump up and down again in just 3 to 5 days. Jiangqing Zi was leaning against another battlement right next to Wu Qi, looking at Wu Qi with a faint smile on his face as he said, "It seems fellow Taoist Wu Qi has enemies everywhere." Wu Qi sighed lightly, looking at Jiangqing Zi helplessly as he said, "To be honest, I have no idea why things have come to this, but..." While Wu Qi was still chatting with Jiangqing Zi, an immortal pressure that blotted the sky and blotted the earth suddenly came pressing towards them from afar. Wu Qi's words were interrupted abruptly, as he quickly raised his head and looked into the distant sky. He saw a large flaming cloud rolling and rolling towards them. Amidst a series of evil laughs, 6 great evil immortals were slowly approaching them on the cloud. On their way to Meng Mountains, they were traveling with the divine ability of teleportation. However, when they saw that they had arrived at their destination, in order to create a certain degree of mental pressure for the allied army in Mo City, Han Shao and the other evil immortals had purposely hoisted the cloud and unleashed all their immortal pressure, intending to give the people of Mo City a show of strength. Wu Qi gave the 6 evil immortals a deep look, then turned to look at the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties, whose attention was completely attracted by them. Hastily, he pulled Jiangqing Zi's sleeve and brought him through a secret passage on the city wall, entering the inner part of Mo City. After taking a random stroll in Mo City, Wu Qi brought Jiangqing Zi to a secluded and deserted storehouse, where the tools of Mo's sect were stored. Staring at Jiang Qingzi, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Brother Jiang Qingzi, White Cloud Immortal Sect is guarded by a Heaven Immortal Ancestral Master, so I believe you should have a clear understanding of the strength of a Heaven Immortal. What do you think, with just the restrictive spells in this city, and the people in it, can we withstand the attack from 6 Heaven Immortals?" Jiang Qingzi frowned and pondered for a while, then shook his head and said frankly, "The design of this city is quite exquisite. At least, even Spirit Flame Sect, who is the best in manufacturing all kinds of magical items and magical treasures in Liyuan Galaxy, could not build a city like this. According to my estimation, if 3 Heaven Immortals were to attack at the same time, this city could hold them off for half a year. With 4 Heaven Immortals joining hands, this city could hold them off for 3 months. If 6 Heaven Immortals were to attack at the same time, I'm afraid." After calculating with his fingers for a long while, Jiang Qingzi said word by word, 7 days, in at most 7 days, this city will definitely be breached. After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi turned to look at Jiang Qingzi and said, "Fellow Taoist, with your cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm in White Cloud Immortal Sect, you are in charge of the Spirit Gathering Palace. I presume you are a man with a high position and power in White Cloud Immortal Sect. What Wu Qi wants to know is, how is your foundation in White Cloud Immortal Sect?" Jiang Qingzi nodded and said, "The founding ancestral master of White Cloud Immortal Sect, Patriarch Jiang Yun, is my lineal ancestor. My branch is the eldest branch of the bloodline left behind by my patriarch. Among all the nascent divinity cultivators in White Cloud Immortal Sect, my great-grandfather has the strongest cultivation base, and is about to face his Heaven Immortal tribulation. My father is now the chief supervisor of White Cloud Immortal Sect's outer sect, and Daozu's father is the chief supervisor of White Cloud Immortal Sect's inner sect." Wu Qi's eyes lit up. Lowering his voice, he said hastily, "If that's the case, that's great. If Wu Qi sells this planet to White Cloud Immortal Sect, as well as Tranquil Vimla Sect, which has an alliance with White Cloud Immortal Sect, you just need to guarantee that no one in White Cloud Immortal Sect can bully me and all the people around me before Wu Qi becomes a Heaven Immortal." Jiang Qingzi's eyes shone with a threatening gleam as he cried out in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Wu Qi, what you just said." Wu Qi patted his sleeves and said helplessly, "Fellow Taoist, you've seen it for the past few days. I was raped by Xiang Yu's woman, and he is determined to kill me. The left prime minister of the current dynasty, Lu Buwei, I've killed his granddaughter and his most favored concubine. The prince of Changxin, Lao Ai, I don't know how I've offended him, but he hates me to the core. The prime minister of Great Wei, Duke of Longyang, I've killed his most favored concubine. Everyone in Daqin." Slapping himself on the head, Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "I've already offended everyone in Daqin, haven't I?" Grabbing Jiang Qingzi's hand, Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "Regardless of the outcome of the battle, if the 6 dynasties emerge victorious and kill all 6 Heaven Immortals, Wu Qi will have no choice but to return to the construction site you saw when you were flying past the other day. I'll find a secluded corner to build a city and wait for those people's revenge." Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, if the 6 dynasties are defeated in the war, there is a 90% chance of that happening. The 6 Heaven Immortals will divide the 6 dynasties equally among them. At that time, His Majesty of Great Yen will be just one of the disciples of some sect, and those enemies of mine will have the same status as him. He will no longer be able to protect Wu Qi. Fellow Taoist, how fast do you think Wu Qi will die at that time?" Jiang Qingzi was a very clever man, extremely clever. He grabbed Wu Qi's hand and said, "If Brother Wu Qi can find a way to inform White Cloud Immortal Sect, asking our ancestral masters and the 3 ancestral masters of Tranquil Vimla Sect to come here and kill those few enemies. Jiang Qingzi can guarantee that before Brother Wu Qi becomes a Heaven Immortal, no one will be able to touch you. On top of that, you will have the priority to enjoy all the products produced on this planet." Looking into Jiang Qingzi's clear eyes, Wu Qi nodded and said, "Deal. Let's do it." Jiang Qingzi waved his hand excitedly, then smiled bitterly and said, "But, the shadow cloud was snatched away by that old fogey Han Shao. How are we going to inform the patriarchs of our sect?" Wu Qi rolled his eyes and gave Jiang Qingzi a look, then casually fished out a formation blueprint from Black Dragon's spirit ring and constructed a small teleportation formation in the storeroom. After that, he pulled Jiang Qingzi and stepped onto it. A bright light flashed, and both of them vanished without a trace. In just a split second, a few energy stones on the teleportation formation suddenly shattered, and the formation plate Chi-Chi had shattered. No one could tell where Wu Qi had gone. Chapter 282. Suddenly, a bright light flashed, and in one of Wu Qi's secret caves hidden deep under a deep lake, Wu Qi and Jiang Qingzi walked out from the teleportation formation. Jiang Qingzi stared blankly at the cave, which was not very big, and could only accommodate over 100 people for a meal, and was densely covered with all kinds of restrictive spells. He asked in astonishment, "Brother Wu Qi, why do you look like you can take out a teleportation formation disc casually, and there are teleportation formations everywhere for you to teleport to?" Wu Qi was speechless. Recalling the hard work he had to go through to arrange all these escape routes, he could not help but look up into the sky and breathe out a long sigh. He gave Jiang Qingzi a look, nodded, and said, "A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. For someone with a weak cultivation base like me, who has offended many experts with formidable cultivation base, how could I survive until now if I did not prepare a few escape routes?" Pointing at the ring on his finger, Wu Qi said with a deep voice, "To be honest, brother, I have stored over 1,000 formation discs for small teleportation formations in this ring. As long as I adjust the frequency of my energy and insert them into energy stones, I will have nearly 100 escape routes." Jiang Qingzi opened his mouth, laughed dryly and said, "What a good habit." He looked at the Black Dragon spirit ring on Wu Qi's finger, then at the storage bag hanging on his waist. His face suddenly blushed. He raised his head and looked at the surrounding rock walls, then praised, "Are all the restrictive spells here made by you, brother?" These restrictive spells are marvelous, as they can conceal one's aura and all kinds of energy ripples. They are indeed a good place to hide." Wu Qi reached out his hand and untied the natural silk from around his neck, then handed over 50 storage rings to Jiang Qingzi. Jiang Qingzi turned around and was taken aback by the sight of over 50 storage rings glinting faintly in front of him. He could not help but cry out in shock, "Brother, this is... Oh my God, how can you have so many storage rings? How did you get them?" Clearing his throat, Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "These rings. Actually, the reason why some people hate me is closely related to these rings. They sent people to kill me, but they were always killed by me, so these rings became my spoils of war." Then, Wu Qi handed the rings over to Jiang Qingzi and said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, I hope you can take good care of me after I join White Cloud Immortal Sect. Here are some storage rings for you to show your filial piety to the seniors in your sect. It's also a token of my sincerity. With more elders looking after him, Wu Qi will have more opportunities." Jiang Qingzi shook his head and sighed. Then, he took the string of storage rings. He smiled bitterly and said, stringing up the storage rings and giving them to someone, "This is really. I'm a dignified hall master, but I only have a high-grade storage brocade pouch. It's too extravagant." Wu Qi chuckled. He took out magic formation plates one after another and built a 90-meter in radius teleporting magic formation on the ground. The teleportation formation did not cover a large area, but Wu Qi had socketed several dozens of 3 feet tall spatial breaching spirit gold pieces on top of it, and added nearly 1,000 upper-grade energy stones to it. Then, he performed a few hand incantation gestures, and the teleportation formation began to glow brightly. In the blink of an eye, 3 layers of 3-dimensional runes were drawn above the formation. Then, Wu Qi took out a large number of energy stones and carefully socketed them on top of the 3-dimensional runes. An invisible restrictive force made these energy stones hover in midair, and a great amount of energy rushed out from them, making the entire formation burst into a dazzling light. All the spatial breaching spirit gold pieces were producing buzzing noises, and began to tremble and shake violently. A great amount of space-time ripples were produced, and a hazy halo that could be seen with naked eyes was formed above the teleportation formation. Wu Qi took a deep breath, then turned to Jiang Qingzi and asked, "Do you have any positioning talismans for White Cloud Immortal Sect's teleportation formation?" Jiang Qingzi stared blankly at the formation constructed by Wu Qi, then stared at those huge spatial breaching spirit gold pieces. He did not know how to speak a word. Upon hearing Wu Qi's question, he took out a glinting talisman from his storage bag and gave it to Wu Qi. Only then did he say with a hoarse voice, "Spatial breaching spirit gold, so many spatial breaching spirit gold pieces. Oh heavens, have you found a spatial breaching spirit gold or vein? Do you know that 30 years ago, such a huge piece of spatial breaching spirit gold was auctioned in the largest treasure-gathering pavilion in Liyuan Galaxy? It was sold for 130,000 upper-grade energy stones. 130,000. When Wu Qi took over the golden talisman, his hand began to tremble. 130,000 upper-grade energy stones. Just for a piece of spatial breaching spirit gold. How scarce must the resources in Liyuan Galaxy be, that the price of spatial breaching spirit gold could be raised to such a level? Shaking his head, he performed an incantation gesture and activated the talisman, shooting out a golden beam and hitting the teleportation formation. Faint roars of wind and thunder could be heard coming from within the formation, as countless talismans were quickly adjusting their positions, and some energy stones were slightly adjusting their positions as well. Gradually, both men could clearly sense that the teleportation formation in front of them had resonated with a teleportation formation located at a very far away place. "Let's go. Brother Wu Qi, I'll bring you to meet the patriarch of our sect." Jiang Qingzi looked at Wu Qi and said, "You can tell patriarch everything that happened here personally. That will be a greater credit to you. Patriarch will always reward those who have contributed to the sect. You can put forward your request directly to Patriarch, and I'm sure he will comply with it." Wu Qi took a few deep breaths, his heart pounding violently. The situation of White Cloud Immortal Sect described by Jiang Qingzi was just his own opinion. No one knew the exact situation of White Cloud Immortal Sect, and whether it was really a righteous sect. However, since things had come to this, it was better to take a little risk than to let this planet, and the cultivators of 6 dynasties, fall into the hands of those 6 evil immortals. Wu Qi had a feeling that if these 6 evil immortals occupied this planet, with their natures, as long as some cultivator who held a grudge against Wu Qi said something, perhaps Wu Qi would be smashed to pieces. Rather than being doomed to be smashed to pieces, he would rather take a risk and take a gamble. If he succeeded, Wu Qi's status in White Cloud Immortal Sect would be unparalleled. If he failed, he could still flee with Princess Zhanglu, Lu Qingfeng, and all his trusted subordinates. This was the reason why he constructed this teleportation formation. After activating the talisman just now, he had memorized the corresponding energy ripples, coordinates, and other information of the teleportation formation. With that, he could construct a new teleportation formation at any time, connecting to the outside world. After spending half a month together with Jiang Qingzi, Wu Qi had learned the exact location of this planet. It was actually in the flaming Nether Ocean, the place where everyone in Liyuan Galaxy was struck with terror. It was worth pondering the mystery behind this, but Wu Qi did not spend his time on it. Since there was such a vast galaxy outside, as long as Wu Qi could construct the teleportation formation at will, he would be able to attack and defend at will. He had nothing to fear anymore. When the energy ripples from the teleportation formation were stabilized, Wu Qi and Jiang Qingzi walked into the formation hand in hand. Jiang Qingzi took out a spirit talisman and activated it, unleashing a screen of light to protect both of them. With his cultivation base of nascent soul realm, he could barely withstand the enormous pressure from the teleportation formation. As for Wu Qi, with his cultivation base of Jin Dan realm, the pressure posed a great threat to Jin Dan realm human immortals. The strong light in the surroundings changed, and a colorful tunnel surrounded both of them as they flew forward at top speed. About 10 minutes later, both of them felt their bodies lightened, and a bright light appeared before their eyes. They were now standing on top of a tall mountain. They were surrounded by a vast ocean of clouds, and the mountain was about 3 miles in circumference. The top of the mountain was flat, and right in the middle of it was a huge teleportation formation. The surroundings were filled with lush flowers, trees, and grasses. The sky above their heads was a greenish blue. As the mountain was protruding from the clouds, no clouds could be seen, and the sunlight was extremely strong. A large flock of white cranes was flapping their wings and flying across the sky, their crisp cries echoing out from time to time. Right when Wuqi arrived at this place, he immediately sensed that the natural energy here was a few times thinner than the planet where Great Yen was located, only about 1/3 of the natural energy in Great Yen Dynasty. Nearly 100 Taoists clad in white Taoist robes were stationed on top of the mountain. When they saw Jiang Qingzi and Wuqi coming out, they cupped their fists and bowed. "Uncle Master is back." "Greetings, Uncle Master." A middle-aged Taoist, who was obviously the person in charge, hurried over, cupped his fists and bowed to Jiang Qingzi and said with a solemn expression, "Uncle Master is back." A few days ago, Grandmaster heard that a 1,000-year-old fine feather gold dragon saliva fruit had appeared on the poison dragon star. Thousands of cultivators fought for this fruit and suffered heavy casualties. Grandmaster was worried that you might have also gone to the poison dragon star. Just now, he sent a few martial uncles to the poison dragon star to look for you. Jiang Qingzi was taken aback. He asked in surprise, 1,000 years old fine feather golden evil dragon saliva fruit? Why didn't I know about this? Right after he cried out, Jiang Qingzi was taken aback again. He gave Wuqi an embarrassed look, smiled bitterly, and said, "Brother Wuqi, I'm sorry for making you laugh at me. It's just a habit, a habit. It has been over 10,000 years since the last 1,000 years old golden dragon fruit was born. As the person in charge of Spirit Gathering Palace, I'm in charge of collecting rare and precious spirit herbs from all over the world." Wuqi nodded with a smile and said, "Wuqi understands. Brother Taoist, you don't have to say too much. The important matter comes first." Jiang Qingzi nodded hastily, pulled Wuqi's arm and said, "The important matter comes first, the important matter comes first. Quick, quick." With the mystic eyes of universe, Wuqi quickly ran his eyes over the teleportation formation on the top of the mountain, memorizing all the minute changes that happened to it. Surprisingly, this teleportation formation of White Cloud Immortal sect was connected to several thousand different teleportation formations. This surprised Wuqi greatly. In other words, he could choose several thousand different routes of retreat. To him, this was a great value. Keeping everything in mind, Wuqi followed Jiang Qingzi into a beam of light, flying quickly towards another mountain that towered nearly 100 miles above the ocean of clouds. On the peak of the mountain, outside the door of an exquisitely crafted wooden palace, Wuqi saw an old Taoist, clad in a white Taoist robe. He had a fair face and a long beard, and had a kind and benevolent countenance. He was leaning lazily on a spotted deer, peeling pine nuts and feeding them to a green-skinned parrot perching on his shoulder. The old Taoist was lying there, surrounded by a layer of white clouds and mist, as if he had become one with the vast ocean of clouds underneath. Pulling Wuqi's hand, Jiang Qingzi flew to the top of the mountain. When he saw the old Taoist, he hurriedly walked up to him with a smile on his face, then bowed deeply and said, "Little grandson Jiang Qingzi offers greeting, Patriarch. May Patriarch enjoy the immortal fortune forever and live a long life. This time, little grandson has an extremely urgent matter that I need your help with." The founder of White Cloud Immortal Sect, Patriarch Jiang Yun, gave Wuqi a surprised look, then turned to look at Jiang Qingzi with a smile and said, "What is it that needs my help?" Wuqi did not want Jiang Qingzi to waste his breath. He strode forward, took out 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies and placed them in front of Patriarch Jiang Yun, forming the shape of a pyramid. Patriarch Jiang Yun was struck dumb with astonishment. He sprung to his feet and cried out in shock, "Innate gold element treasures? It seems they are not fully formed yet. But, they are still rare treasures. Where did you get them?" Little friend, who are you?" Patriarch Jiang Yun glanced at all 360 pearls. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then, without any longing, he moved his gaze away and looked at Wu Qi. Wu Qi felt relieved immediately. This patriarch Jiang Yun was not a greedy man, nor did he have a wicked heart. This man was trustworthy, and he could befriend him. He breathed out a sigh of relief, then retracted the silver lotus and divine flame of order that were ready to burst out from between his brows back into his spiritual ocean. Chapter 283. Imitating Jiang Qingzi, he cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Suddenly, Wu Qi realized that although many members of the imperial clan and clans in Great Yan dynasty practiced the art of cultivating qi, it seemed they did not have the concept of Dao League. It was only after he met Jiang Qingzi that Wu Qi saw the standard Daoist robe, and heard Jiang Qingzi addressing himself as Daoist. He had only seen this gesture of cupping his fist and bowing to Jiang Qingzi. With a thought in his mind, Wu Qi told Patriarch Jiang Yun about his identity, as well as the situation of Great Yan. However, as he had a feeling in his heart, he only gave a perfunctory explanation about the origin of Great Yan and the other kingdoms. With his current identity, age, and experience, it was impossible for him to know the detailed history of Great Yan and the other kingdoms. When Patriarch Jiang Yun heard that the planet where Great Yan and the other kingdoms were located was actually a rich and undeveloped planet, even with his cultivation of qi, he could not help but cry out in surprise. Especially when he heard that Han Shao Immortal had been chasing after Jiang Qingzi, forcing him to flee into the flaming nether ocean and discover the planet where Great Yan and the other kingdoms were located. Patriarch Jiang Yun's face turned unsightly. He snorted coldly. The white cloud wheeled rapidly around him as he nodded and said, Han Shao, it looks like we have to put an end to this old freak. Over the last several dozens of years, many disciples of our sect were killed and had their souls disintegrated, and all the spirit-storing jade slips in our sect had exploded. I think it must be Han Shao's doing. Wu Qi dropped to his knees and bowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun, then said in a deep voice, Patriarch, for the sake of the Emperor and ministers of Great Yan, and the millions upon millions of people, please lend us a helping hand. With what Han Shao and the other evil immortals have done, if Great Yan were to fall into their hands, all the people would suffer. With the current national strength of Great Yan, if Great Yan were to fall into the hands of Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect, the arrogance of these two evil sects would skyrocket, and it would be a disaster instead of a blessing for countless cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy. After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Jiang Yun gave the pile of 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies in front of him a look. He pointed his finger at them and said with a smile, Wu Qi, my young friend, is telling the truth. But what is the purpose of these Xiantian Gung metal treasures? Reverently, Wu Qi kowtowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun and said in a deep voice, this is the gift to acknowledge me as your master. I do have a few enemies in Great Yan dynasty, and in the three dynasties of Great Chu, Daqin, and Great Wei, there are people who wish they could kill me. This is the gift of seeking protection. Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded and said, all right, this old Taoist will accept you as my disciple. It would be impolite of me to refuse the gift of acknowledging you as my master. As for the so-called protection gift, there was no need to say anything more. As my disciple, if something happens, I will naturally step forward to protect him. There is no master in this world who would only step forward to protect his disciple after receiving a gift from him. There is no such logic in this world. Casually, Patriarch Jiang Yun pointed his finger at the air, and a gleaming rune spread out before his fingertip, followed by a crystal-clear chirp. Bai Xia, Qing Wu, quickly come to me. Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out softly. Several hundred miles away, on the peak of a lofty mountain that was level with the ocean of clouds, a white cloud and a green mist soared into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, two slender figures clad in Taoist robes arrived next to Patriarch Jiang Yun. They were two beautiful, middle-aged Taoist nuns, who looked dignified. Upon their arrival, they immediately sat cross-legged next to Patriarch Jiang Yun. Without hesitation, Jiang Qingzi dropped to his knees and kowtowed, little grandson Jiang Qing offers greeting, ancestral grandmothers. Wu Qi gave the two middle-aged Taoist nuns a surprised look. It turned out that they were Patriarch Jiang Yun's wives. White Cloud Immortal sect had 3 ancestral masters, and all 3 of them were experts of Heaven Immortal realm. But, Wu Qi did not expect that these 3 ancestral masters were actually husband and wife. Basically, White Cloud Immortal sect was a family-style immortal sect dominated by the Jiang clan. That was a good thing, as a sect like this would have a stronger cohesiveness, and the internal atmosphere would be more harmonious. Patriarch Jiang Yun pointed his finger at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "Wu Qi, the disciple I've just taken in, has a pretty good bone structure, and the cultivation technique he cultivates with 5 elements is very stable. He has a very solid foundation. Look at these 360 innate gold element treasures, they are a gift from this little boy to the 3 of us. Now, White Cloud Immortal sect can have 1 more cornerstone treasure, and with that, those little boys will have a greater chance of transcending their Heaven Immortal tribulation in the future." Both middle-aged Taoist nuns gave Wu Qi a glance, nodded and smiled at the same time. Clad in a green robe, Qing Wu Immortal chuckled and said, "He is a pretty good boy." After giving Wu Qi a careful look, Qing Wu Immortal fished out 18 spirit talismans from a storage ring on her finger and gave them to Wu Qi. "As a senior, I can't take advantage of my juniors," said Qing Wu. "Here are 18 spirit talismans for your protection. Although they are not as precious as these innate gold element treasures, they are still a token of my appreciation." Bai Xia Immortal nodded her head and smiled. Without saying a word, she too fished out 18 glinting spirit talismans and gave them to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was struck with wild joy. These spirit talismans were personally crafted by Heaven Immortals, and were at least 100 times more powerful than those talismans from Heavenly Spirit sect. Each of these talismans had the mighty power to kill a nascent divinity cultivator in a split second. With these talismans, Wu Qi would have many more ways to protect his life. Using the simplest words, Patriarch Jiang Yun described the reason why Wu Qi came here. Qing Wu Immortal frowned and said in a deep voice, "Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing sect and Spirit Flame sect have many conflicts with White Cloud Immortal sect. Even if we can't kill them, we have to severely damage their vitality, so that they won't dare to confront us for the next 18,000 years. Since that old fogey Han Shao has the audacity to touch our disciples, we have to kill him this time." Slowly nodding his head, Patriarch Jiang Yun casually pointed his finger and cut open the meridians on his left wrist. A large amount of pale golden blood sprayed out and sprayed onto the 120 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies. He smiled faintly and said, "Initially, I did not have the confidence to kill that old fogey Han Shao, but with this supreme treasure, the chance has increased by 50%. Bai Xia, Qing Wu, don't waste any more time. Quickly refine them with your prime blood essence, and you'll be able to put them to basic use." Imitating Patriarch Jiang Yun, Bai Xia and Qing Wu struck at the same time. A large amount of pale golden Heaven Immortal blood essence sprayed onto the grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies, each refining 120 pearls at the same time. Watching off to the side, Wu Qi nodded his head inwardly. Although this set of pearls was not fully completed, it was, after all, an innate treasure with an extremely powerful power. By controlling them with the strength of a Heaven Immortal, they could barely unleash some of their power, but it was still too strenuous for them. With each of them controlling 1/3 of the pearls, they could unleash a greater power. As Patriarch Jiang Yun, Bai Xia, and Qing Wu were husband and wife, and they had been cultivating together for tens of thousands of years, their minds had long been connected, and they were no different from a single person. Therefore, by refining them separately and using them, it was equal to one person using them. This set of grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies was given to the right person. Especially when they began to refine the pearls directly, Wu Qi breathed out a heavy sigh of relief in his heart. With this set of innate pearls as his foundation, as long as he did not commit any disrespectful crime, such as deceiving his master and patriarch, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in White Cloud Immortal sect, and he would no longer have to worry about being held back by others. After all, he was now Patriarch Jiang Yun's personal disciple, and his seniority in White Cloud Immortal sect could be considered as frightening. After spending 6 hours, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other 2 heaven immortals had completed the preliminary refining of the pearls. White clouds, white mists, and green mists were wheeling and coiling around them, while 360 pearls emanating a frigid aura were seen shuttling back and forth amidst the clouds and mists. They kept producing shrill whistling noises of piercing through the air, ripping one after another faint dark spatial cracks in the air. Patriarch Jiang Yun laughed delightedly and said, "Excellent. With this precious treasure, if we join hands, we can fight against a heaven immortal who is 3 tiers stronger than us. From now on, White Cloud Immortal sect will have no more worries in Liyuan Galaxy." The 3 heaven immortals had a telepathic connection. Together, they opened their mouths and shot out a sword beam. One after another, the frigid pearls attached themselves to the sword beams, then disappeared into them in the blink of an eye. As the sword beam streaked across the sky, the speed of the sword beam skyrocketed by more than 10 times, and wherever they went, the void was torn open with a faintly discernible crack. Through the concealment of the sword beams, no one could discover the existence of the grand white spatial breaching pearls. They would only think that Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other 2 heaven immortals had obtained 3 mighty immortal swords. Patriarch Jiang Yun laughed delightfully. He gave Wu Qi a loving look, nodded his head and said, "Good boy, good boy." After a brief moment of pondering, he smiled at Jiang Qingzi and said, "Well, Jiang Qing, in the future, you can ask me directly about your homework. You and Wu Qi are friends, and if you have to address him respectfully as Patriarch whenever you see him in the future, it will be hard for you." Wu Qi gave a strange laugh, narrowing his eyes as he looked at Jiang Qingzi. Jiang Qingzi gave Wu Qi a glare, then delightedly gave Patriarch Jiang Yun a few kowtows. Patriarch Jiang Yun gave a loud laugh. Suddenly, the sword beams wheeling above his head shot out, flying towards the lofty mountain where the teleportation formation was located. Above the teleportation formation, Patriarch Jiang Yun's 100 feet long white sword beam flashed and disappeared. After a full 15 minutes, the teleportation formation suddenly burst into a blinding light, and a white beam flew back at top speed. Following behind it were 3 old Taoists with white hair and beard, shrouded in immortal energies, and several hundred Taoists of all ages. Hastily, Wu Qi used the mystic eyes of universe to examine these Taoists. He discovered that their aura was pure and not blurry, their eyes were as clear as water, and their bodies were shrouded in pure energies. Indeed, they were cultivators from the Righteous League who had cultivated both energy and mind to a certain level. Only then did he breathe out a sigh of relief. These Taoists should be the people from the Tranquil Vimla sect, who had formed an alliance with White Cloud Immortal sect for several tens of thousands of years. The 3 old Taoists flying at the forefront were the 3 ancestral masters of Tranquil Vimla sect, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi. These 3 old Taoists were actually blood brothers. Many years ago, they had obtained a Taoist lineage with an immortal fate together, and after achieving a certain level of cultivation base, they founded the Tranquil Vimla sect, which had been developing in Liyuan Galaxy for several tens of thousands of years. Patriarch Jiang Yun rose to his feet, together with Bai Xia and Qing Wu, the 2 heaven immortals standing behind him, greeted them and said, "Fellow Taoists, thank you for your hard work." The 3 old Taoists, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, who looked almost identical, quickly cupped their fists and said, "You flatter us. Fellow Taoist, this is an opportunity for Tranquil Vimla sect to develop and grow stronger. How could we say we are tired?" Wu Qi and Jiang Qingzi rose to their feet hastily, following behind Patriarch Jiang Yun as they cupped their fists and bowed to the 3 old Taoists. After bowing and returning the greetings according to their seniority, Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded and said, "Just now, I sent a message with my flying sword. Fellow Taoists, do you know what happened in that room? We must strike with a thunderous strike, and make those few Taoists stay in that place. Otherwise, it will bring us many troubles in the future." Qing Xian nodded and said, "All right. I've brought the sect guarding treasure, the heart-calming chime." With a wave of his hand, a clump of green mist sprayed out from Qing Xian's palm. A tiny jade chime, about the size of a toddler's head, simple in design and glinting brightly, hovered above his palm. Patriarch Jiang Yun laughed and said, "Excellent. White cloud sky veiling flag, rise." Then, he casually extended his hand and made a grabbing motion. Immediately, the ocean of clouds that stretched for several million miles around the lofty peak began to roll and roll. In just a blink of an eye, all the clouds quickly gathered in one spot, transforming into a tiny white spirit flag, about 1 foot in circumference, and fell into Patriarch Jiang Yun's palm. Surprisingly, the boundless ocean of clouds was actually the White Cloud Sky-Veiling Flag, the sect-guarding treasure of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Several hundred beams of cloud flew up from several dozens of lofty peaks in all directions, flying towards them. The elite cultivators of White Cloud Immortal Sect had turned out in full strength. Chapter 284. The teleportation formation flickered with a bright light, as Chi-Chi, a group of nearly 1,000 cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, walked out from it. Looking at the sealed cave walls, and then at the countless restrictive runes on them, Patriarch Jiang Yun could not help but smile and say, "Wu Qi, my disciple, you are really cautious." Shaking his head, Patriarch Jiang Yun had no idea how to evaluate Wu Qi. He recalled the time when Patriarch Jiang Yun was still a cultivator of Jin Dan's sect. With just a flying sword, he had stirred up troubles all over the world, and was beaten up badly by the enemies. It seemed that at that time, Patriarch Jiang Yun did not have the awareness to prepare a few escape routes. Only heaven knew what was in Wu Qi's mind, as he had prepared so many escape routes, and even built a grand universal teleportation formation. Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the three old Taoists, had their eyes fixed on the spatial breaching spirit gold in the teleportation formation, not even blinking. Spatial breaching spirit gold. So much spatial breaching spirit gold. Even for a sect, this was a very valuable strategic treasure. With these spatial breaching spirit gold, the sect would be able to save a lot of energy stones when building the teleportation formation. Similar to White Cloud Immortal Sect, Tranquil Vimla Sect had a planet under their control, with important strongholds of various sizes scattered all over the planet. Teleportation formations were built between each stronghold for their disciples to travel back and forth. If they could have so much spatial breaching spirit gold, Tranquil Vimla Sect would be able to save millions of energy stones every year. How many disciples could they provide with 1 million energy stones to improve their cultivation base and cultivation speed? And how many more spirit pills, magical treasures, and the like? Qing Xian cleared his throat and was about to say something, but Wu Qi had already bowed to the old Taoists and said with a faint smile, "Seniors, in Great Yan Dynasty, in the territory of Duke Yanlu, Wu Qi's sworn brother, Lu Qingfeng, there is an ore vein of spatial breaching spirit gold. It has a very rich reserve. Not to mention White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, even if there were 10 times more immortal sects, it would still be enough." Chi-Chi, who was crowded in the small cave, gasped. "A or vein of spatial breaching spirit gold. Did they hear wrongly?" They all knew that several decades ago, the treasure-gathering pavilion of Liyuan Galaxy auctioned a piece of spatial breaching spirit gold, which was sold at a sky-high price of 130,000 upper-grade energy stones. 130,000 upper-grade energy stones. However, judging from the fact that Wu Qi had used over 1,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold to build this grand universal teleportation formation, it seemed that there really was such a mine. This planet was indeed a priceless planet. If White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect could occupy this priceless planet and use it as their secret stronghold, the prosperity of both sects would be just around the corner. Taking a deep breath, Patriarch Jiang Yun suddenly said, "The spiritual energy here is several times denser than in my White Cloud Peak." Sure enough, it was an undeveloped treasure planet. "However, Wu Qi, you said that there are immortal cave residences here. Hastily, Wu Qi took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "Currently, Great Wei and Great Zhao are fighting for the immortal cave residences, and it has dragged all 6 dynasties into the war. If not for the sudden arrival of Han Shao and the other evil immortals, perhaps the 6 dynasties would have already fought to the death for that relic, and blood would have flowed like a river." Before Han Shao and the other evil immortals arrived, the 6 dynasties had actually lost 1 million soldiers. 1 million soldiers. Qing Xian murmured, "Most of them are cultivators of Xiantian realm?" Wu Qi forced a smile, nodded his head and said, "Yes, at least the soldiers of Great Yan's Blood Swallow Army, Black Swallow Army, and other elite armies are all Xiantian realm warriors." Patriarch Jiang Yun fell silent. Bai Xia and Qing Wu were speechless. The 3 old Taoists Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi were speechless, and the nearly 1,000 elite cultivators from both immortal sects were speechless. More than 1 million Xiantian cultivators. Apart from this kind of treasured planet with abundant spirit qi and natural treasures everywhere, no other place could cultivate so many Xiantian cultivators. Both White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect were guarded by 3 patriarchs of Heaven Immortal Realm. But, if both immortal sects were to combine all their Xiantian cultivators, could there be more than 100,000 people? It was not that they did not have enough disciples with sufficient foundation and talent, but they simply could not afford to raise so many disciples. Shaking his head, Patriarch Jiang Yun said in a deep voice, "There are relics of immortals here, and the natural energy here is so strong, as well as so many natural treasures. Admittedly, this planet is huge. But, the situation here is still a little strange. When we are done with this matter, we must find out the exact situation of this planet." The group of Heaven Immortals nodded their heads. Under Wu Qi's guidance, they stepped into the short-distance teleportation formation which Wu Qi had prepared in his cave abode, and teleported to a forest that was only about 100 miles away from Mo City. Patriarch Jiang Yun unleashed the white cloud sky-veiling flag. A faint layer of cloud rose from the ground, enveloping everyone within it. To Wu Qi's surprise, the faint layer of cloud could actually isolate the probing of divine will. Even with the unique divine will of his nascent divinity, he could not penetrate through it. Under the cover of the cloud, the group flew up close to the ground, flying quickly towards Mo City. At last, they were less than 10 miles away from Mo City. Up in the sky, a huge metal city was madly engulfing the raging flame from the Earth's core. Countless runes were blinking on the surface of the city, while several thousand huge armaments from Mo's sect were shooting out beams of blinding light into the sky. The bodies of Han Shao Immortal and the other evil immortals were faintly visible in midair, dodging the attacks of these beams with ease. No matter how hard the disciples of Mo's sect who were controlling these armaments tried, they just could not lock down the whereabouts of these immortals. All of a sudden, Zhenmu's sovereign laughed ferociously. With a wave of his hand, a green wooden stake, about 1 mile in diameter and 100 miles in length, smashed down from the sky amidst a very strong green thunderbolt, smashing viciously onto the defensive barrier of Mo City. The green wooden stake exploded with a loud boom, filling the sky with green flames and green thunderbolts. The defensive barrier of Mo City was shattered layer by layer, and on top of a city wall located at the northwest corner of the city, a large number of runes exploded abruptly, wounding several dozens of cultivators from 6 dynasties who were waiting solemnly in the vicinity. Zhenmu's sovereign let out a wild laugh. Countless tiny wisterias stretched out from his body, drilling into the woods within 1,000 miles circumference, crazily extracting the enormous aura of wood element found in the woods, injecting it into his body and transforming it into his own immortal energy. With a wave of his hand, 7 to 8 huge green wooden stakes smashed viciously onto the defensive barrier of Mo City once again. Right at this moment, Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign struck at the same time. Laughing out loud, they transformed into a pair of transparent flaming men, swinging down flames that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth. All of a sudden, the wood element energies burst into flames, enveloping the entire Mo City in a blink of an eye, burning the defensive barrier of Mo City and causing it to explode. A threatening heat swept across the entire city, melting some of the weaker metal plates in the city, while some of the metal components were spraying out large amounts of white molten iron like the eruption of a volcano. Right after the wood element energies were completely burned out, and the frighteningly high temperature was not over yet, Han Shao Immortal had already sprung down from the sky while laughing evilly. A large sheet of cold air enveloped the entire Mo city in an instant. The city, which was still expanding because of the high temperature, was instantly frozen by the frighteningly low temperature, causing it to shrink abruptly. The extreme temperature and extreme cold changed in an instant. Countless jarring noises of explosion kept ringing out, as countless cracks appeared on the metallic body of Mo City. After that, White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady plunged down from the sky while laughing wildly. With a sway of his body, White Ghost Immortal abruptly transformed into a blurry shadow, smashing forcefully onto the last remaining defensive barrier of Mo City. Jarring noises of slicing and slicing rang out, as countless pitch-black ghost claws emerged out of thin air, spraying dense dark smoke as they came tearing at Mo City. Each of these ghost claws measured several tens of feet in circumference, and with just a casual strike, they could rip a lofty mountain to shreds. Amidst the tearing of countless ghost claws, the defensive barrier of Mo City creaked as if it could not withstand the heavy load. A very long and deep crack was torn open from the middle of the city, and it looked like it was about to be torn apart by White Ghost Immortal. Meanwhile, Ghost Lady let out a wild laugh. 9 blurry female shadows hovered around her, letting out shrill cries as they casually thrust their hands down. Immediately, countless spears and flying daggers made from white bones shot out in all directions, bringing with them dense dark smoke as they plunged down, filling the sky above Mo City with sparks and sparks. Inside the city, Yen Dan and the others could only stand there blankly. Their divine will could not lock down on the figures of 6 evil immortals, and they could not find out where the real bodies of their enemies were. There was no way they could launch any attacks. In addition to wasting true essence in vain, there was no other use for him to recklessly increase the power of the Forbidden Law curse. Heaven immortals and cultivators were existences on 2 completely different levels. When one could not even locate the real bodies of the enemies, how could one attack them? Even Xiang Yu, who nearly could not restrain himself from unleashing the banner of Qiyu, could only stand there blankly. Even if he did use the banner of Qiyu, with his current cultivation base, it was impossible for him to trap 6 evil immortals with it. It would still not help the situation, and would instead attract the attention of others. Up in the sky, 6 evil immortals let out wild roars once again, unleashing another wave of attacks that rained down like a raging storm. Mo City was shaking violently. Countless cracks had appeared on its surface, and the earth core fire pillar underneath had turned dim and lightless. When the 6 evil immortals were attacking the real body of Mo City, they had also cut off the earth energy veins and fire veins underneath, gradually weakening the supply of fire energy to Mo City. Therefore, the defensive mechanism of Mo City had become weaker and weaker. In the end, almost any casual attack from them could break a large chunk of the defensive mechanism. Amidst jarring whistling noises, another wave of attacks came whistling down. While laughing strangely, Zhenmu's sovereign threw down 18 huge green wooden pillars in a row, while Han Shao Immortal had transformed into a clump of cold air, getting ready to give Mo City another blow. At the same time, Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign teleported right above Zhenmu's sovereign. Both brothers opened their mouths and shot out 2 pale blue flame beams, which shrouded Zhenmu's sovereign's entire body in just a blink of an eye. Han Shao Immortal raised his head in horror, and happened to see Zhenmu's sovereign howling miserably as he was engulfed by the blue flame, while a large patch of skin on his back was burned into ashes in a blink of an eye. Therefore, even though Zhenmu's sovereign's cultivation base was stronger than Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign, he was still badly burned by the prime true flame unleashed by them, and was severely wounded on the spot. White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady let out a strange laugh at the same time. Suddenly, the attack that they had been accumulating for a long time smashed heavily onto Han Shao Immortal's body. Han Shao Immortal reacted very quickly. When he saw Zhenmu's sovereign was attacked, he immediately unleashed the purple bamboo silk flowers. However, as both White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady had joined forces, their cultivation base was almost equal to his, and they even launched a sneak attack, landing a heavy blow on Han Shao Immortal's back and sending him flying down. Boom! Boom! Two muffled booms rang out. Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal crashed through the last layer of Mo City's defensive mechanism, smashing onto the metallic ground in a sorry state. Chi-Chi coughed out a mouthful of blood. Zhenmu Sovereign's blood burst into flames when it came into contact with the wind, while Han Shao Immortal simply coughed out a stream of pitch-black ghost aura. Up in the sky, Black Feather Sovereign and the other three joined forces, charging down while laughing hideously. Kill them. Then, Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect will share this priceless planet. Not allowing Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal to flee, a storm of attacks came whistling down, engulfing the entire Mo City. Chapter 285. Kill. 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 Black Feather Sovereign, Inferno Sovereign, White Ghost Immortal, and Ghost Lady let out a loud roar at the same time, using all the methods available to them to fly down. When they were besieging Mo City just now, they had already reached a secret agreement with Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal. They would join hands and kill both of them, while the two sects would share this priceless planet. As the ancestral masters of the evil immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy, these four men had been in frequent contact with each other, and their relationship was much stronger than that of Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal. In their opinion, these two itinerant cultivators, who did not have any disciples to provide for, were just cutting a piece of meat from their sections. The priceless planet was priceless, and half of the profits should not be left to two itinerant cultivators. Therefore, they quickly reached an agreement. They would kill Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal, while the other two sects would share all the profits on this planet equally. 4 against 2, and with a sneak attack from the back, they would definitely win. Sure enough, Zhenmu Sovereign and Han Shao Immortal were killed by them with just one strike, and were severely wounded. As Zhenmu Sovereign cultivated with Wood Element technique, his body was invaded by Black Feather Sovereign and Inferno Sovereign's Prime True Flame, which nearly set his internal organs on fire. In just a blink of an eye, about 50% of the immortal energy in his body was burned away by the invading fire. As a result, his overall strength was at most 50% of his usual strength, which was on par with the others. On the other hand, Han Shao Immortal's body was invaded by an immense ghost aura, which kept devouring his prime energy essence. He was also severely wounded, and his cultivation base was weakened by about 30%. However, Han Shao Immortal's cultivation base was far weaker than Zhenmu Sovereign, and with his cultivation base weakened by 30%, he was no match for either White Ghost Immortal or Ghost Lady. Staring at the four former allies who were swooping down from above, Han Shao Immortal cried out sternly, "Old fogey Zhenmu, fight with all your might, or you will really die here." Then, he opened his mouth and spat out his purple bamboo flower basket in a flustered and exasperated manner. Countless colorful petals danced and danced in the air, while the flower basket shot up into the sky and exploded amidst Black Feather Sovereign and the other three. The flower basket was a lower-grade immortal item, and for the sake of escaping, Han Shao Immortal had no choice but to explode it. The sliver of his primordial spirit hidden in the blossom's orchid was destroyed, and his primordial spirit was immediately heavily injured. Large amounts of black blood spurted out from his 7 apertures. A blinding light flashed, and hundreds of huge flowers appeared in the void at the same time. An enormous immortal force surged out, and countless razor-sharp 5-colored halos wrapped around Black Feather Sovereign and his companions, killing them at the same time. Black Feather Sovereign and the other 4 evil immortals coughed out a mouthful of blood at the same time. The explosion of the immortal items on their bodies had even exposed their bones. Han Shao Immortal detonated his immortal item in a moment of desperation, and the power of the explosion was not to be underestimated. Even though the 4 of them had made preparations before the sneak attack, they were still riddled with scars from the explosion, and their vitality was greatly damaged. Ghost Lady's cultivation base was the weakest among them. Her arm was blown off, and her chest, which was shaped like a beautiful woman's, was blown away, revealing a large patch of white bones. It was a beautiful contrast with the white bones of the other half of her body. The scene was extremely miserable. Ghost Lady let out a shrill cry as she flew into a rage. Suddenly, the 9 indistinct female ghosts around her became clear. Obviously, they were 9 ferocious and frightening evil ghosts with green hair and red eyes. Pointing her finger at Han Shao Immortal, Ghost Lady roared furiously, "Kill him! Tear him into pieces! Devour all his energy essence!" 9 evil ghosts leaped down from the sky, while Ghost Lady curled up her body and leaped forward. 3 feet long sharp claws stretched out from both of her hands, grabbing towards Han Shao Immortal in a messy manner. Han Shao Immortal coughed out a mouthful of blood. After exploding his immortal item to buy himself a brief moment to catch his breath, his body swayed and attempted to flee with teleportation. However, before he could flee, Zhenmu's sovereign had already rolled his strange eyes, as a sticky green beam shot out from the erect eye between his brows and smashed viciously onto Han Shao Immortal's back. Han Shao Immortal's body trembled, and abruptly turned a pale green color. Zhenmu's sovereign grabbed Han Shao Immortal's neck, then casually threw him towards the 4 evil immortals and 9 evil ghosts who were swooping down from the sky. Zhenmu's sovereign roared sternly, "Brother Han Shao, I have no choice but to trouble you to fight for a slim chance of survival for me today. Leave a thread of your soul for reincarnation, and in the future, I'll definitely find your reincarnation and guide you to continue your cultivation of immortality. If you reincarnate as a man, I'll take you as my adopted son. If you reincarnate as a woman, I'll marry you as my concubine, and I'll never wrong you." Following Zhenmu's sovereign's almost shameless shout, Han Shao Immortal was thrown high up into the sky in a flustered and exasperated manner. From the erect eye between Zhenmu's sovereign's brows, a strong green beam kept shooting out and injecting into Han Shao Immortal's body. All of a sudden, Han Shao Immortal's body began to swell up, turning into a round ball. A dense green gleam burst out from his body, and a large amount of thick green smoke that came with a pungent odor burst out from within. Yan Dan and the rest of the people turned into bright beams and fled into the distance. With a complicated expression, they looked at these heaven immortals who had suddenly turned against each other. "Fight, fight with all your might. It will be the best if all of you are dead." After fleeing for several hundred miles at full speed, Yan Dan and the rest of the people turned to look back at Imo City, which was now enshrouded in a strong light. Only then did they realize that it was a very childish idea to fight against heaven immortals with the combined forces of 6 dynasties. Heaven immortals were not existences that could be resisted by human beings. Only heaven immortals could fight against heaven immortals. Immediately, the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties turned their gazes towards the cultivators and demon kings who had the most hope to break through the realm of heaven immortal in a short period of time. Above Mo City, Han Shao Immortal's body suddenly exploded. A green mist towered into the sky, as countless thick green smoke that came with a pungent odor of grass and wood transformed into countless tiny threads that shot up into the sky amidst the green light. Caught unprepared by the attack, Black Feather Sovereign and his companions had their bodies riddled with countless tiny holes that looked like sieves. These tiny holes were not strong enough to kill a heaven immortal, but they were enough to weaken a great deal of their immortal energy, causing a great loss to their prime energy essence. It was especially true for the 9 evil ghosts, as their bodies were riddled with holes by the green threads. Abruptly, they exploded into 9 clumps of dense smoke and returned to Ghost Lady's body. Ghost Lady roared furiously in anger. She waved her hand casually, unleashing countless spears and flying daggers condensed from white bones to shoot down. Zhenmu's sovereign staggered, as he coughed out another mouthful of burning blood. He glared at the 4 evil immortals who were shooting down against the green light, grinned hideously and said, "If you want to kill me and reap all the benefits, you will have to be alive first. Hee, Brother Han Shao, have a safe journey. I'll let you bastards witness the power of the greenwood soul-seizing fiend eye that I've refined for over 37,000 years. For the sake of this priceless planet, I'll risk it all." Suddenly, the erect eye between Zhenmu's sovereign's brows exploded, completely and utterly, without leaving any trace behind. Zhenmu's sovereign let out a miserable howl, as countless wounds appeared all over his body like an old tree peeling off its bark, while a large amount of blood sprayed out from the wounds. Suddenly, the towering green light beam shrank inwards, wrapping tightly around the four evil immortals like a silkworm in a cocoon, wrapping them tightly in the core of the light ball. On the surface of the light ball, one could vaguely see the terrified and despairing figure of Han Shao Immortal. However, the figure only swayed a few times in the light ball, before it suddenly transformed into a clump of green mist and fused into the light ball. The blood that flowed out from the explosion of Zhenmu's sovereign's erect eye shot up into the air and fused into the light ball. The flying daggers and spears unleashed by Ghost Lady kept hitting the surface of the light ball, causing large sheets of strong light to burst out, yet no matter how hard she tried, she just could not break through the light ball. The other three evil immortals were also attacking the light ball with all their might. However, the light ball was formed from the fiend eye which Zhenmu's sovereign had refined for over 30,000 years, as well as all the blood essence of Han Shao Immortal. How could they break through it so easily? While laughing ferociously, Zhenmu's sovereign quickly performed some incantation gestures with both hands. Slowly, a wooden blade with an ancient and heavy shape, glinting with a green gleam, slowly flew out from between his brows. Upon the appearance of the wooden blade, Zhenmu's sovereign's body quickly withered, as if all the blood essence in his body was sucked dry by the blade. Staring at the four evil immortals, who were struggling and roaring crazily in the light ball, Zhenmu's sovereign laughed wildly and said, "I've sacrificed 70% of my blood essence, risking my cultivation base to drop back to the threshold of 36th tier heaven immortal. I'm going to use this immortal blade made from the spirit heart of a 10,000 years old man-eating tree to kill all of you." Zhenmu's sovereign cried out sternly, "As long as I have this priceless planet, everything will be worth it. I can establish my own sect here, and I can do whatever I want here. With the power of this priceless planet, I have a chance to become a gold immortal. Ha ha ha, once I become a gold immortal, ha ha ha." Zhenmu's sovereign, who was waving his arms and legs wildly, held the wooden blade in his hand and chopped off his left arm and both of his legs. In the blink of an eye, the bizarre wooden blade had absorbed all of his broken arms and legs, leaving nothing behind, not even a speck of ashes. Zhenmu's sovereign laughed ferociously, staring at the four panic-stricken evil immortals and said, "You only know that I, Old Mu, have 1 foot in the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal. But, you have no idea why I, an 18th tier heaven immortal, who has ascended to the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal at almost the same time as all of you. But, why is my cultivation base so much faster than all of you?" Waving the wooden blade in his hand, Zhenmu's sovereign grinned coldly and said, "This is the answer. I, Old Mu, was lucky enough to obtain the legacy of a demon immortal who had fallen in the ancient times, and was also cultivating a wood element cultivation technique. This is the soul-seizing demon blade, made by that 18th tier demon immortal using the spirit heart of a 10,000 years old man-eating tree. He, an 18th tier demon immortal." Then, he waved the blade casually, transforming it into a fierce green beam that shot out and smashed viciously onto the light ball. As if it was made of crystal, the light ball shattered into pieces amidst a jarring noise of explosion. The four evil immortals who were trapped in the light ball let out a miserable howl, as their bodies were nearly ripped to shreds by the shattered light ball. Countless of their bones were broken, and all their muscles were ripped to shreds. A huge amount of blood kept bursting out from their wounds. The wooden blade whistled through the air, piercing through Black Feather Sovereign's forehead and coming out from the back of his head. The soul-seizing demon blade had shattered Black Feather Sovereign's immortal soul, killing him completely. Black Feather Sovereign's body shriveled up quickly, as all his blood essence was sucked dry. Then, it was Inferno Sovereign's turn. Not waiting for him to exercise an immortal technique and flee, the wooden blade came shooting over and pierced through his head. After that, the blade beam flashed again, and all four of White Ghost Immortal's limbs were chopped off by the green blade beam. His body fell heavily to the ground, and his blood sprayed everywhere. Zhenmu's sovereign coughed out a mouthful of blood, then he staggered and drifted towards Ghost Lady, who was lying on the ground and unable to move. Laughing hideously, he said, "Ghost Lady, don't scare me with that hideous look. I know you can reverse your cultivation technique and regenerate your fleshly body. Come, transform into the appearance of a beautiful girl. Today, I'll use you as my cultivation vessel to heal my wounds." Grabbing the half-human, half-ghost Ghost Lady, Zhenmu's sovereign laughed wildly and said, "Old Mu, today, in front of White Ghost Immortal, I'm going to torture you as my cultivation vessel. Hee, how dare you to have evil thoughts towards me? But, little did you expect that I actually have this trick up my sleeves." A miserable howl was heard, as 3 sword beams, 1 green and 2 white, came shooting over and piercing through Zhenmu's sovereign's forehead, heart, and dantian. The grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies hidden in the sword beams vibrated at a high frequency, producing tiny spatial cracks and ripping Zhenmu's sovereign's immortal soul to shreds. Suddenly, a loud chime rang out, as a large sheet of white clouds rushed out from the ground. Nearly 1,000 cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect arrived on the clouds. Immediately, both Ghost Lady and White Ghost Immortal let out a bitter, despairing laugh. A blinding light flickered, as both of them self-detonated at the same time. Patriarch Jiang Yun reacted very quickly. The white cloud sky-veiling flag in his hand transformed into a vast ocean of clouds and rolled out, wrapping around the enormous impact produced by the self-detonation of both Ghost Lady and White Ghost Lady, then quickly sent them up into the sky, allowing them to explode in the sky. A loud boom echoed out as a blinding light sprinkled down from the sky, and even the planet under their feet trembled a few times. All 6 evil immortals were killed, and not even their ashes were left. Looking at the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties in the distance, Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, can you talk with me? Both White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect have the intention to build their headquarters here. What do you think?" The emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties looked at each other speechlessly, sighing in their hearts at the same time. Chapter 286. In the main meeting hall of Meng Fortress, 6 heaven immortals, including Patriarch Jiang Yun, sat high up in the main seat, shrouded in immortal energies. The faint immortal pressure emanating from these 6 heaven immortals made everyone in the hall hold their breaths, not daring to show any disrespect. It was especially true for the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties. After facing the terrifying strength of the 6 evil immortals, they truly understood the gap between immortals and mortals. By relying on various divine abilities, mystic arts, or powerful natal magical treasures, the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties might be able to fight against a single heaven immortal, but when 6 heaven immortals joined forces, they could instantly destroy the allied army formed by all the cultivators of the 6 dynasties. Moreover, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect had brought nearly 200 nascent divinity cultivators, and over 2,000 nascent soul cultivators. Unlike the cultivators from the 6 dynasties, the cultivators from the 2 great immortal sects had been hanging around Liyuan Galaxy for a long time, fighting with other cultivators for various reasons. Therefore, they were more experienced, and their cultivation bases were more profound. Under the circumstance where the cultivators from the 2 great immortal sects had the same cultivation base, they could easily fight against 2 or even 3 cultivators from the 6 dynasties. Before this war, the cultivators of the 6 nations basically did not have much battle experience. For example, many of the imperial sinecures of Great Yan's Cloud Swallow Pavilion had smoothly cultivated to nascent soul realm, living a luxurious life and never stained their hands with blood. For example, Gigazi, Mod, and Sun Kuang, who had the status of imperial advisor, had never fought before the Great War of Meng Mountains. As for the cultivators of the 2 great immortal sects, they were fighting with other cultivators, they were fighting with demons, they were fighting with demon beasts, they were fighting with other cultivators, they were fighting with demons, they were fighting with demon beasts. For example, Jiang Qingzi was always out and about, searching for various spirit herbs and rare treasures for White Cloud Immortal Sect. He even put his life on the line, which gave him a rich experience in fighting. That was the reason why he was able to escape from the pursuit of heaven immortals. Putting aside the 6 heavenly immortals, just the ordinary disciples of the 2 immortal sects were enough to completely suppress Yen Dan and the others. Unless they used their natal magic treasures, such as the Cauldron of Yu, the Imperial Jade Seal, and the Disc of Heavenly Tao of Reincarnation, they would not be able to fight against the disciples of the 2 great immortal sections. But once the 6 heavenly immortals joined the battle, the emperors and ministers of the 6 states would be instantly wiped out. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other heaven immortals sat quietly in the hall, not saying a word, while the eldest disciple standing next to them did not say a word either. Yen Dan and the others exchanged looks and discussed various issues with their courtiers through voice transmissions from time to time. The eyes of Yen Dan, Chu Ping, Ying Zheng, Wei Wuji, Tian Wen, Zhao Sheng, and the other emperors of the 6 dynasties were flickering. They quickly exchanged glances with their allies, but would never look into the eyes of the emperors of the enemy dynasties. The atmosphere in the hall was very strange, oppressive, and extremely mysterious. However, at this very moment, Wu Qi was seen flying at top speed in the sky above the great Eastern Ocean with a smile on his face, leading a group of nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Using divine abilities, a few nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect were bringing Wu Qi flying forward at top speed. As a result, their flying speed was extremely fast. It did not take them long to cross the ocean, and they came to the sky above a huge island located in the middle of the ocean. The island measured over 10,000 miles in circumference, and was surrounded by a cluster of islands of various sizes. The edges of each island were as steep as blades, and the main structure of the islands was made of grayish-white rocks. There were very few plants and soil on the islands, while deserts and the Gobi Desert occupied more than half of the island's surface area. It was the same situation for the surrounding clusters of islands, and it was the same for the big island in the middle. On the cliffs that stood several tens of thousands of feet tall at the edge of the island, one after another, huge nests were dug out. From the bottom of the cliffs, from the height close to the ocean, all the way to the entrance of the nests, a steep staircase was dug out. When Wu Qi and his company arrived, they saw a large number of longbow people climbing up the cliffs along the staircase, throwing one big fish after another into the nests. Some female longbow kingdom warriors walked out of the nest with broadswords in their hands. They squatted at the entrance of the nest and cut off the heads of the big fishes with one clean slash, then cut open their stomachs, picking out their internal organs and throwing them into the ocean below. Using thick ropes, they strung up these big fish, which measured from several tens of feet to several hundred feet long, and hung them outside the nests. A large number of iron pillars were nailed on the ground at the entrance, and the big fish were hung on these iron pillars with ropes. The ocean breeze blew past, swaying the big fish that were cut into halves, slamming into the cliffs and producing loud banging noises. As far as the eye could see, the cliffs were densely covered with big fish, some of which had been dried by the ocean breeze and the scorching sun. Apart from the big fish, there were also the carcasses of big sea beasts and sea turtles, all of which were the food stored by these longbow people. Under the cliffs, some longbow people had exercised their innate divine ability, growing their bodies to several thousand feet tall. They stood naked in the ocean, laughing aloud as they chased after the big fish. The water level was only up to their waists, and when they ran and chased after the big fish, they brought up a great amount of water splashes, which slapped against the surface of the water and produced loud booms. All of a sudden, a huge whale, over 2,000 feet long, leaped up from the ocean. A longbow man laughed wildly, and with a sway of his body, he came before the whale in a blink of an eye. Two huge fists were thrust out along with a frightening wind-splitting noise, smashing viciously onto the whale's head and killing it on the spot. Complacently, the longbow man picked up the whale's tail and dragged it towards the nests on the cliffs. Behind the cliffs, in a small desert about 180 miles inland, a group of longbow people, who stood several tens of feet tall and looked like children, were playing a dangerous game. They were laughing and teasing a group of gigantic double-tailed poisonous scorpions and pitch-black poisonous desert vipers. The enraged poisonous scorpions and snakes spurted out large amounts of venom. The pitch-black venom splashed on the ground, corroding the sand and causing a sizzling noise. After a while, the group of young men from Longbow Kingdom became impatient. Suddenly, they pulled up several tens of feet wide boulders from the ground and threw them forcefully towards those unlucky scorpions and venomous snakes, smashing them into meat paste. Laughing and joking, the group of youngsters spread out in groups of 3 to 5. Soon, they formed teams of men and women, found a cool spot in the desert with their backs to the sun, took off their clothes, and began the most primitive activity of human reproduction. When Wu Qi scanned these youngsters with his divine will, he could not help but give them a few glances in surprise. Judging from the aura of their life force, they were roughly equivalent to 7 to 8 years old human children. Yet, they had already begun to carry on the family line. The strong life force of Longbow people was indeed extraordinary, as they had already matured at the age of 7 to 8 years old. Surrounding Wu Qi, over 20 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, were treading on clouds and hovering above those Longbow people, who were busy hunting the fishes. There were about 300,000 Longbow people living here, and they could be considered as the strongest tribe among all the tribes in Longbow Kingdom. According to those slave traders, the entire population of Longbow Kingdom was about 3 to 4 million people. Looking at the Longbow people down below, Wu Qi cupped his fist at those nascent divinity cultivators and said, "Senior brothers, please help me capture 9,900 Longbow people alive for Wu Qi. Among them, 4,900 will be men, while the other 5,000 will be women. All of them must be adults. After capturing them alive, I'll force them to open up their souls, so I can plant a soul-controlling spell in them." While smiling and bowing at these nascent divinity cultivators, Wu Qi handed each of them a storage bag. The storage bag was about the size of 5 rooms, and it contained nothing but energy stones, millions of energy stones. When these nascent divinity cultivators gave the storage bag a glance with their divine will, their expressions changed instantly, and their faces were immediately filled with smiles. A peak-stage nascent divinity Taoist from Tranquil Vimla Sect smiled and said, "Junior brother Wu Qi is too courteous, too courteous. Senior and junior brothers, we are ordered by our masters to help junior brother Wu Qi capture Longbow people alive, so that they can serve as the patrolling guards for junior brother Wu Qi's cave abode in the future. Everyone, please work harder, and don't choose those useless people. It's best if they are those Longbow people who have formed the Jin Dan Alliance." The group of nascent divinity cultivators roared with laughter, then exercised their magic and divine abilities, transforming into wild gusts of light and shadow that blotted the sky and blotted the earth as they plunged down. The Longbow people down below were struck with terror, and they began to give out urgent warning cries. However, all the cultivators who came with Wu Qi were the most elite nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Among them, there were 18 peak-stage nascent soul cultivators. Although Longbow people lived a long life, and possessed amazing innate talents, the thunder tribulation they had to face when breaking through their cultivation base was extremely powerful. Among the over 300,000 Longbow people down below, only a few hundred of them had formed the Jin Dan Alliance. How could they be a match for so many nascent divinity cultivators? Countless Longbow men cried out in alarm as they were pulled up into the air by numerous giant hands that flickered with bright lights. Then, a mighty divine will forcibly split their souls, allowing Wu Qi to leave a soul-controlling spell in their souls. In just one day and one night, Wu Qi had gathered a total of 9,900 Longbow people. Together with the 100 Longbow people in his spirit breeding ring, he now had a total of 10,000 Longbow people. As long as they consumed the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup and transcended their Jin Dan thunder tribulation with Wu Qi's help, the heavenly 100 spirit warring formation formed by 10,000 Longbow people would have the power to fight against a heaven immortal. Even if they were not the match for a heaven immortal, once any nascent divinity cultivator, or even a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator, were trapped in the formation, they would definitely die. The heavenly 100-spirit warring formation had a scale of 10,000 longbow people. Any more and it would only disturb the operation of the formation, and it would not be able to form a complete whole. Wu Qi was confident that once all these longbow people had their cultivation base improved to nascent soul realm in the future, the heavenly 100-spirit warring formation would have the overall strength to kill a heaven immortal. He had subdued 9,900 longbow people here, and on the other side, the cultivators from the two immortal sects were still capturing longbow people. They had captured another 10,000 longbow people, all in pairs of men and women, and planted soul-controlling spells in their souls. The people of longbow people were nearly extinct in the outside world. At least, no one in minor heavenly circle realm had ever heard of any longbow people living here. An ancient race with a formidable potential like this could fetch a price a few times higher than those powerful demon beasts when they were auctioned. No matter it was as a slave for the immortal sects, or as a guard of honor during a journey, they were very useful. Who asked them to be so tall and strong? When Wu Qi and his company had gone far away, countless cries and screams were heard coming out from the nest where the people of longbow people lived. Every year, many longbow people would be captured by the slave traders from Great Yan Dynasty. But this time, over 20,000 of their people were captured. This was the heaviest loss in the history of longbow people. When those brave longbow people came out from their nest with fear and trepidation, Wu Qi and his company had gone far away. Chapter 287. 10,000 longbow men began to work hard on the foundation of the new city that Wu Qi had decided to build. They used huge rocks the size of small hills to make the foundation even and sturdy. 3 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal sect stayed behind, helping Wu Qi in building the city. As White Cloud Immortal sect was an expert in the field of talismans and spirit pills, with them helping Wu Qi to construct the defensive mechanisms of the city, he could rest assured of the strength of the city's defense. Princess Zhanglu returned with 3,000 lady officials, and continued to oversee the construction of the city. With Princess Zhanglu keeping watch, Wu Qi had absolutely no worries. After spending 3 days at the construction site, Wu Qi finally settled everything. Only then did he leisurely return to Meng Fortress through the teleportation formation. 3 days ago, Wu Qi did not meet Yan Dan and the others. Instead, he submitted a report to Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other Heaven Immortals, asking them to select a group of nascent divinity cultivators to accompany Wu Qi to the Great Eastern Ocean to abduct longbow men. Also, 3 nascent divinity cultivators from White Cloud Immortal sect were left behind to help Wu Qi construct the defensive mechanisms of the city. He did not meet Yan Dan, as he wanted to avoid any unforeseen events that might occur after they met. Wu Qi kept a distance from them, as he wanted to see the decision made by the emperors of the 6 dynasties. He had vaguely mentioned some things to Patriarch Jiang Yun, and the reason why he returned to Meng Fortress today was to see what was the decision made by Yan Dan and the others. Just now, Wu Qi received a message from Meng Fortress, saying that the plan had been finalized. The teleportation formation suddenly shone brightly. As soon as Wu Qi walked out from it, he heard loud laughter coming from the meeting hall. Patriarch Jiang Yun, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the 3 old Taoists, were laughing joyfully. Hastily, Wu Qi flew to the entrance of the meeting hall, then carefully walked into it. Almost everyone turned to look at Wu Qi at the same time. Yan Dan and Chu Ping nodded at Wu Qi in a friendly manner, while the eyes of the others were filled with complicated emotions. This was especially true for those who held grudges against Wu Qi. Their eyes were spitting fire, and they wanted nothing more than to stab Wu Qi to death. Among them, Xiang Yu's eyes were the most venomous. His eyeballs had turned blood red, and 2 beams of blood red light were about to fly out from his eyeballs and pierce 2 holes in Wu Qi's body. Looking straight ahead, Wu Qi walked into the meeting hall. He first bowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun and the few Heaven Immortals, then quietly returned behind Yan Dan and sat down in an empty seat at the right-hand side of Lu Qingfeng. By doing this, Wu Qi had silently shown that he was still a subject of Great Yan Dynasty, and was still a member of Great Yan Dynasty. Upon seeing Wu Qi's action, Yan Dan suddenly put on a relieved smile and nodded his head in a gratified manner. After that, Yan Dan gave him a fierce glare. After a brief moment of pondering, he rose to his feet and bowed to Patriarch Jiang Yun and the few heaven immortals. Then, he said in a deep voice, "Dear immortals, great Yan's Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi, and my youngest daughter, Zi Xian, are very fond of each other. May I be so bold as to ask the few immortals to be the witness for Wu Qi and Zi Xian, and settle their marriage first?" Wu Qi was surprised. He turned to look at Yan Qijuan, then nodded thoughtfully. Then, he rose to his feet and came before Patriarch Jiang Yun, dropped to his knees respectfully and said, "Wu Qi is willing to marry Princess Xianglu, Zi Xian. Once Wu Qi forms his nascent soul, he will marry Zi Xian." Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded his head, smiled, and said, "This is a good thing, a very good thing. It is reasonable for a young man to marry after forming his nascent soul. Therefore, young men should be courageous and diligent in their cultivation. Generally speaking, even the disciples of various immortal sects will only look for a partner and marry after forming their nascent soul. Cultivating together with nascent soul is a good thing for both sides." After that, Patriarch Jiang Yun gave Bai Xia a look. Bai Xia nodded and said, "Very good. Princess Xianglu, Zi Xian. Let her be my disciple, and let her cultivate with me." Yan Qijuan was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and thanked Patriarch Jiang Yun and Bai Xia Immortal. With the decision made by two heaven immortals, the marriage was settled. Wu Qi was secretly delighted as well. It was the best news that Bai Xia Immortal would take Princess Xianglu as his disciple. At least, in Liyuan Galaxy, no one would dare to touch Princess Xianglu. As long as Princess Xianglu was safe and sound, Wu Qi could rest assured and boldly soar into the sky. Today, he had left Princess Xianglu in the new city, and after today, he would ask Princess Xianglu to make up for the ceremony of formally acknowledging him as her master. A heaven immortal's words carried enormous weight. The marriage between Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu was settled. Yan Qijuan gave Wu Qi a fierce glare, then spun and returned to Yan Dan's side. With a strange smile on his face, Wu Qi returned to Lu Qingfeng's side, then bowed his head and transmitted his voice to Yan Qijuan, "Don't worry, father. I'll definitely treat Zi Xian well." After a brief pause, Wu Qi continued in a soft voice, "However, Wu Qi doesn't want Zi Xian to be fed an energy-seizing pill like her mother one day. From today onwards, she will be Wu Qi's fiancée, and not just your daughter." Yan Qijuan's expression flickered. He turned and gave Wu Qi a look, then slowly nodded his head. Wu Qi nodded his head slowly as a greeting. Both of them, including Yan Dan who was sitting with his back straight, knew that from today onwards, Wu Qi had truly become a member of Great Yan Dynasty. Through Princess Xianglu, the interests of both sides had been closely linked together. All three of them knew that if not because Wu Qi had brought Patriarch Jiang Yun here, as well as White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, the marriage between him and Princess Xianglu would not have been settled so easily. Wu Qi had made a brilliant move, while Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan had pushed the boat along with the current, borrowing the other's strength to fight back. It was a brilliant move as well. Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded at Wu Qi with a smile, then said coolly, "In this way, the 3 days of discussion has finally come to an end. Emperor of Great Yan, Yan Dan, Emperor of Great Chu, Emperor of Great Wei, Emperor of Great Wei, come forward." As Patriarch Jiang Yun's voice rang out, Yan Dan, Chu Ping, and Wei Wuji rose to their feet at the same time and came before Patriarch Jiang Yun, dropping to their knees and kowtowing to him respectfully. Wu Qi gave Yan Dan and Chu Ping a furtive glance, then turned to look at Wei Wuji from head to toe. The Emperor of Great Wei, Wei Wuji, was a middle-aged man, standing 9 feet tall, with a square face and a fierce look on his face. Especially his deep-set eyes and brows that were as sharp as blades, it was easy to tell that he was a man with a firm mind. Sensing Wu Qi's gaze, Wei Wuji tilted his eyes and gave Wu Qi a fierce glare. This Wei Wuji had a pair of very long eyes, which gave him a very wide range of movement. He could almost see his own ears, and his line of sight was very wide. Wu Qi did not expect that he would have such a strange look, and could not help but want to burst out laughing when he saw Wei Wuji's behavior. The prime minister of this prince of Xinling, Wei Wuji, was Duke of Longyang. Narrowing his eyes and smiling, Wu Qi was imagining the relationship between Wei Wuji and Duke of Longyang. Looking at the emperors of the three dynasties kneeling on the ground, Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded his head satisfactorily and said, "Very good. With 3 excellent disciples, White Cloud Immortals sect will have a bright future." Following that, Yan Dan and the other 2 changed the way they addressed Patriarch Jiang Yun, calling him master. Patriarch Jiang Yun smiled, then fished out 3 booklets made from purple gold threads from under his sleeve and gave them to Yan Dan and the other 2. With a serious tone, he said, "This is the mystic technique of our sect, the energy unity technique. In minor heavenly circle realm, it can be considered as a superior cultivation technique. Now that you have learned it, I can teach you the best." Once again, Yan Dan and the other 2 bowed their heads and listened to the order. After acknowledging Patriarch Jiang Yun as their master and receiving the mystic cultivation technique of White Cloud Immortal Sect, Great Yan, Great Chu, and Great Wei would become the vassals of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Just like the mortal kingdoms on White Cloud Planet, everything would be under the control of White Cloud Immortal Sect. From then on, all the raw materials related to cultivation produced by the 3 dynasties would be offered to White Cloud Immortal Sect, and if any natural or man-made calamity befell the 3 dynasties, White Cloud Immortal Sect would provide them with full assistance. In the presence of so many people, Yan Dan and the other 2 sworn their prime oath, swearing that they would be loyal to their master, and would never commit any crime of deceiving their masters. After that, Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, Xiang Yu, Fan Zheng, Duke of Longyang, and the other important ministers of the 3 dynasties stepped forward and acknowledged Bai Xia and Qing Wu, the 2 heaven immortals, as their masters. They too received the legacy of the cultivation technique, and from then on, became the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Everything went smoothly for the others, but when Duke of Longyang gracefully knelt before Bai Xia and Qing Wu, both heaven immortals had a strange expression on their faces. They were stunned for a while, and finally, Qing Wu, who was more amiable, accepted Duke of Longyang. After all the important ministers of the 3 dynasties swore their prime oath, swearing to be loyal to their masters, Patriarch Jiang Yun waved his hand, and all the ministers returned to their seats. After that, Ying Zheng, Tian Wen, Zhao Sheng, and the other emperors of the 3 dynasties rose to their feet. Da Qin, Great Zhao, and Great Qi became the vassals of Tranquil Vimla sect. The emperors and important ministers of the 3 dynasties also became the disciples of Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the 3 old Taoists. The emperors and important ministers of the 3 dynasties also swore their prime oath, swearing to be loyal to their masters, and that they would never commit any crime of deceiving their masters or destroying their masters. The 3 old Taoists also taught them the Tranquil Vimla sect's Tranquil Heart Sutra, and with that, the ceremony of acknowledging their masters was completed. After that, it was Patriarch Jiang Yun and Qing Xian's turn to reiterate that the 2 great immortal sects had been friends for several tens of thousands of years, and they were allies of life and death. Therefore, no matter what kind of enmity existed between the dynasties, no one was allowed to retaliate in private by any means, so as not to break the alliance between the 2 sections. If there was a personal grudge, it was fine to seek revenge, but it must be under the supervision of their masters and seniors, in a fair and open duel. Upon hearing the wishful warning from the 2 old Taoists, Wu Qi could not help but laugh in his mind. 2 great immortal sects have recruited this group of people who are as fierce as wolves and tigers, and you still want to live in peace. Not only the 2 great immortal sects, even Liyuan Galaxy and Minor Heavenly Circle Realm are waiting to have a hole poked through by this group of people. Wu Qi had a feeling that he had borrowed a key, opened the gate of a beast, and released a group of dreadful beasts. Although Wu Qi had no idea what kind of place this Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was, he felt that the heavens had blessed him. Looking at the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties in the hall, Wu Qi lowered his voice and asked Lu Qingfeng, "Why do so many of them seem to have no objection to joining White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect?" I can see that Xiang Yu and the others, even the most unruly ones, including the emperor of Qin dynasty, Ing Zheng, are more than willing to acknowledge these two sects as their masters. Lu Qingfeng gave the people in the hall a glance, then said in a low voice, "Come to think of it, it is a strange thing. For the cultivation technique of all the emperors and ministers of 6 dynasties, peak stage nascent divinity realm is the limit. Even if they transcend their thunder tribulation and become heaven immortals, if they want to take another step forward, they will have to refer to the cultivation technique after the realm of heaven immortal. Now, 2 great immortal sects have taken the initiative to recruit them as their disciples. How worthwhile is that? The cultivation technique of all the emperors was peak stage nascent divinity realm, and there was no other cultivation technique after that?" Wu Qi nodded his head thoughtfully. "No matter what, from now on, this planet would belong to White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.